Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, October 9th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 734 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll talk about the ceasefire agreement to bring an end to the slaughter. What has been agreed and what will come next? How can Israel and the United States be trusted to implement any agreement after so many violations and betrayals? Jeremy Scahill of Dropsite News will join us to discuss the latest developments. Also, our regular contributor Donya Abu Sitta joins us to discuss the situation in Gaza and the mood there on the eve of a possible ceasefire. Later on in the program, Jon will cover the latest resistance news from Gaza City, including a raid on an Israeli military base established inside a school in Tel Al-Hawa. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Early Thursday morning, as news of a possible end to the slaughter began to circulate, journalist Salah al-Jafarawi and his colleagues, along with recording their own updates, informed people by walking in the streets and shouting that there was an end to the war and a hopeful truce. Reporter Anas Ayad captured this clip.
وقفت الحرب لما توصل وقف اطلاق النار يا جماعه ما عندوش نت يعرف لما توصل لوقف اطلاق النار احنا حالنا يا شباب غزه طلعوا هذه الطريقه المناسبه احنا 3 بني ادمين ماشيين في الشارع عارفين انت على في شمال غزه وفي غزه بشكل عام كل شيء يعني هذا حل حيوي.
Just a few hours ago, Salah al-Jafarawi filmed celebrations in the streets. Members of Gaza's heroic civil defense, he says, share in the joy of the news of a ceasefire. Here is that clip.
لحظات انتظرنا سنوات لنعيشها. انتظرنا سنتين عشان نعيش هذه اللحظات. سجدات الشكر في مفترقات مدينة غزة. هذه اللحظات اللي انتظرناها سنتين من العذابات المستمرة. اليوم بنعيش هان في شمال قطاع غزة. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ربنا أكرمنا وشفنا هذه المشاهد. الحمد لله. أرواحنا من أجل الله. أرواحنا من أجل الله. عرقنا من أجل الله. عرقنا من أجل الله. عملنا من أجل الله. عملنا من أجل الله.
We'll have much more on the latest ceasefire developments later on in the show. Palestinians on the ground in Gaza City say that since the ceasefire talks in Egypt began earlier this week, Israel only continued to escalate its attacks. The Gaza government media office stated on Wednesday that in the 4 days since the announcement of a potential truce, Israel carried out 271 separate attacks, killing approximately 126 people, 80 of whom were killed in Gaza City. Our longtime contributor Mohammed Assad uploaded images after the Israeli army destroyed his home earlier this week on October 7th in Gaza City, forcing his family to seek shelter once again. His home was damaged in previous attacks, and his family worked to clean it up and repair it. But this week it was completely razed to the ground. Quote, "Our dreams turned into a mirage," he said. Earlier in the week, the media office released updated statistics on the 2 years of genocide, including figures on the destruction of homes, livelihood, health, and infrastructure across Gaza. Among the data set was an estimate that Israel has dropped more than 200,000 tons of explosives on Gaza since October 2023. More than 835 mosques were completely destroyed, the media office added, and at least 180 others were damaged, while 3 churches were damaged in bombings. More than half of all Gaza's 60 cemeteries have been targeted as well, 14 of which have been completely destroyed and 18 partially destroyed. The media office estimates that nearly 80,000 Palestinians have been killed or are still missing since the beginning of the genocide. 67,000 of whom were brought to hospitals and recorded as killed by the health ministry. Nearly 10,000 are missing and still buried under the rubble, and approximately 20,000 children have been killed. Among the dead are 1,015 infants under a year old. 460 Palestinians have died from starvation, and nearly 170,000 have been injured, including 19,000 who will need long-term rehabilitation. 4,800 people have had their limbs amputated, nearly a fifth of them children. Israeli armored vehicles packed with explosives have continued to destroy buildings and entire city blocks around Gaza City, particularly in the Sabra neighborhood, where this video from journalist Ahmed al-Saifi was filmed on Wednesday. Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud reported on Wednesday that, quote, Israeli forces are scaling up attacks aimed at the systematic destruction of the city's remaining infrastructure, flattening what is left of residential buildings, public facilities, and entire neighborhoods. The army is reportedly using remote-controlled explosive robots alongside air attacks and heavy artillery to demolish densely built areas, Mahmoud added. Fighter jets have targeted wide boulevards and high-rise blocks in the city center, leaving large sections of Gaza City reduced to rubble. Despite talk of a potential agreement, many in Gaza believe the Israeli military is rushing to complete the destruction before any truce takes effect. On the ground, people describe what feels like the final stage of destruction, an effort to render Gaza uninhabitable by erasing all means of life, he said. On October 3rd, reporter 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 spoke to a grandmother who survived an Israeli attack on tent shelters at the Gaza port. Sitting on the floor next to a metal bed with no mattress where two small children lay unconscious, she asks, quote, what did children do to deserve this? 3 children and their mother, who is my daughter, and my sister, over 15 people were killed in this strike. What did they do? She says that they were displaced from Jabalia in northern Gaza, and the Israeli army targeted their tent. Palestinian civil defense workers in Gaza say that the situation in the north of Gaza is apocalyptic, especially following last week's closure by Israel of the main north-south road in and out of Gaza City and the rest of the northern governorates. Civil defense ambulance services worker Mohammed Tammuz was filmed by journalist Mohammed Abu Luay on October 5th. Tammuz says that massacres, bombings, and detonations are happening around the clock with no let-up. Quote, entire landmarks and blocks have been erased and have fallen on top of residents' heads. Entire families are erased from the civil registry. In northern Gaza, life has become almost non-existent. There is no electricity, water, food, or drink, or anything suitable for life. The situation here is very difficult, very catastrophic, he said. On October 7th, marking 2 years of Israel's genocide in Gaza, Palestinian civil defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal described what 24 months of relentless assault has taken from Palestinians, with the whole world watching. He said that along with the enormous death toll, 2,700 families have been completely erased from the registry, and 6,000 people are now the sole survivors of their entire families. More than 90% of all homes in Gaza, Basal says, have been destroyed in Israel's 2-year assault. More than 80% of Gaza itself is under the control of the Israeli occupation. He says, quote, 2 years of war, and we still say to the whole world, we continue to repeat to the world that we are a people who deserve to live, and that our people deserve to live like any other people in the world, and that they have the right to be safe and at peace without any war or murder. Also on Tuesday, Al Jazeera's Hind Khudari reported that a Palestinian child was shot in the head in eastern Gaza, and 6 Palestinians were killed in separate attacks in the southern city of Khan Yunis. She said, quote, this shows that despite everything going on in the negotiations over the U.S. proposed ceasefire deal, Palestinians are still being killed throughout the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military's explosive robots continue destroying residential neighborhoods where Palestinians know that even if this war is brought to an end, they won't find anything to go back to. Maha Husseini, a journalist, human rights worker, and researcher in Gaza with the Euromed Human Rights Monitor, recorded this video for the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting earlier this week.
Mr. President, I speak to you from my last refuge after I was forcibly expelled from my home in Gaza City under relentless Israeli bombardment. Though I don't know if by the time you hear these words I will still be alive or buried under rubble. Gaza is under unprecedented Israeli attacks, and I have been forcibly displaced with my colleagues at Euromed Human Rights Monitor several times now. I meant to present this statement as a human rights defender, to document and to advocate, but today I can no longer count the Israeli crimes I witness because they surround me in every breath and every hour. It's a shame that I had to tear up my business card at some point during this genocide to avoid being killed or detained by the Israeli military. We demand, not plead, we demand immediate protection for those documenting genocide in Gaza. We demand unhindered access for international investigators, and we demand that the perpetrators are brought to justice. Every silence from you, representatives of states and civil society at this council, is another strike of the hammer driving the coffin of the international law.
Maha Husseini of Euromed Human Rights Monitor. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported on Tuesday that Israel's destruction of the health system over the last 2 years is complete and deliberate. Quote, over the course of 730 days, the health sector has been subjected to devastating and lethal attacks that have ravaged the very fabric of its services and infrastructure, the health ministry stated. Reporter Hussein Kreis captured this footage of Israeli quadcopter drones striking the burned-out surgical building at Al-Shifa Hospital on September 30th. The ministry added, quote, these crimes have earned the description health genocide due to the catastrophic indicators that have ravaged the health and humanitarian landscape in the Gaza Strip. Observers and decision-makers in international health and humanitarian institutions are concerned about the success of emergency responses that maintain a minimum level of service. Hospitals have been transformed into concrete structures as a result of direct and indirect military strikes, completely emptied of the components of diagnostic and therapeutic care. More than 1,700 medical personnel have been killed, and 362 are still detained in Israeli torture camps, where they are being deprived of basic human rights. 25 hospitals out of 38 are completely out of service, leaving only 13 still partially operating under difficult conditions. Israel has also destroyed 103 primary healthcare facilities. 55% of all medicines are currently out of stock. 2/3 of all medical supplies are out of stock, and nearly 70% of laboratory supplies are out of stock, the ministry adds. James Elder, the spokesperson for the UN Children's Agency UNICEF, reported from Gaza on the prevention by the Israeli army of newborn incubators earlier this week, deliberately denying the most fragile babies basic machinery to keep them alive.
All missions in Gaza are life-saving, and maybe this one particularly so, heading north right now into Gaza City to a hospital under evacuation order to get incubators out and to other hospitals where they are so desperately in need. Incubators, oxygen, ventilators. Here we go again, fifth time now, fifth time seeking approval to save children's lives. Fifth time.
That was from UNICEF. Last week, we reported on the global Samud flotilla, the 44 boats with nearly 500 humanitarian aid activists that attempted to break Israel's siege on Gaza. All of the boats were eventually hijacked and seized by Israeli forces, but the last boat, the Marinette, evaded Israeli capture until Friday, October 3rd. Right before it was hijacked, a Marinette passenger delivered this final message to Palestinians in Gaza.
From the sea to Gaza, we will not forget you. We will not let you to be forgotten. This is the voice of humanity. No one can stop the voice of humanity. Free, free Palestine!
After seizing all of the boats and unlawfully towing them out of international waters into the Ashdod port, Israeli forces detained all of the activists in Ashdod before transferring them to the notorious 𝐓𝐡𝐄 prison in the Nakab Desert. In Ashdod, Israel's extremist National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir taunted and screamed at the flotilla activists, calling them terrorists.
טרוריסטים של המשט, אלה הטרוריסטים, די טרוריסט. תקל עליהם, תומכי רוצחים, אגב, האוניות שלהם נמצאו קרחנה שלמה. הם לא באו באמת, לא למשט, לא לעזור, אלא הם באו בעד עזה, בעד הטרוריסטים. אלה טרוריסטים. הם תומכי טרור. מה זה פה? הספינה שלהם, המפכ"ל בדיוק מראה לי את זה, יחד עם מפקד מחוז דרום. מחפשים כאן סיוע הומניטרי. יש כאן מטרנה אחד. מה זה? זה סיוע הומניטרי? אני לא רואה פה שום דבר. יש כאן מטרנה אחד, כמו שהמפכ"ל אומר, ונראה כל חינגה אחת גדולה. איזה חינגה יש כאן?
After her release, a Turkish activist described the abusive treatment that they experienced at the hands of Israeli guards. She says in this clip, quote, "We protested Ben-Gvir very well. I said, 'Shut your big mouth, you genocidal filth.'" She goes on to describe the harsh conditions inside the prison and says that there was writing on the wall in dried blood, words written by Palestinian women who had been imprisoned there before. The detained activists were told to drink water from the toilets. 22-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who was a participant on the flotilla, was singled out for abuse, according to eyewitnesses. She was physically assaulted, and Israeli soldiers attached an Israeli flag to her back and tied her hands. Italian journalist Lorenzo Agostino described her treatment.
Thunberg, a brave woman who is only 22 years old, she was humiliated and wrapped in an Israeli flag and exhibited like a trophy. I had a feeling of being in a really barbaric place, and I really hope that this barbarism might be over soon. First, we were kidnapped in international waters. Then they took us to land, and once on land, they behaved like a terrorist group. People were kicked. We were left without fresh water for over 2 days. Overall, they took every opportunity to humiliate any of us. We were treated like terrorists because we thought we were terrorists. So I was unlucky enough to get out just while Ben-Gvir was coming. And so the police used very, very tight handcuff on us that stopped our circulation. They blindfolded us and they put us in a van with barely any clothes and with very, very low temperature. So high conditioning that was freezing. And they kept us there for probably 3 hours.
After she was released, Greta Thunberg said this at a press conference.
No, not heroes. No, we are doing the bare minimum. What we are doing is not in any way, no one has to come to the rescue of Palestinian people.
Shifa Abdi, a Finnish Somali activist, told reporters after she was released from Israeli detention that the most shocking thing about the prison wasn't the abuse they faced, but the place itself. She says, quote, "When we arrived at the prison, there was a picture on the wall showing the destruction of Gaza, all the houses in ruins, and Palestinians in Gaza trying to find their families or their belongings. And on that picture, it says in Arabic, Gaza al-Jadida, or New Gaza, They are proud of it. What they have done to Gaza is a source of pride for them. Beneath it was a large, dried blood stain. We had to anxiously think about what had been done to the Palestinians here. Every cell was filled with the names of Palestinian men. We found a piece of cloth we tried to clean with because no one cleaned anything there, and on it there was an embroidered name, Abu Allah. That's how we found out the names of the Palestinian prisoners. Every night I was anxiously thinking, where had these men been taken? What had been done to them? Where is Abu Allah? I'm in Helsinki now, but where is Abu Allah? Allah's father, where is he? What have they done to him? Activist Shifa Abdi speaking in Helsinki earlier this week. Another flotilla of 3 boats named after the Gaza sunbirds, Ala al-Najjar and Anas al-Sharif, set off towards Gaza from southern Europe as the global Samud flotilla was being hijacked last week. All 3 boats were intercepted and hijacked by Israeli forces early in the morning on October 8th. This footage is of the Gaza Sunbirds boat being taken by Israel. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Underdog Palestine Will Prevail by Asim al-Nabih, writing from Gaza. He writes, quote, "In the brutal arena of history, Palestine has never been a heavy hitter. Israel possesses the warplanes, the tanks, the surveillance networks, and the unwavering backing of global superpowers. The battlefield is tilted, the referee biased, and yet somehow Palestinians are still here, demanding our rights and calling for our freedom, not because we overpower, but because we endure. For colonized people like us, victory was never going to be a knockout punch. We never dreamed of winning in one decisive blow. The imbalance of power is too immense for such fantasies. But if history teaches anything, it's that those who survive each round, bleeding but upright, sustained by clarity and collective purpose, are often the ones who endure until the final bell. What's happening now is more than political. It's epistemic. It's a war of narratives deciding who gets to define reality, whose suffering counts, whose voices are amplified. For decades, Israel dominated the narrative. It set the parameters of discussion and held influence over much of the global media coverage. While that still holds true with the mainstream corporate media in the West today, young Gazans with no electricity and shattered phones are speaking truths that millions are now hearing. Our narrative is breaking through, unfiltered, raw, undeniable. And that is one of the most decisive shifts of all. In the long game of history, narrative matters. Israel is rapidly losing the struggle for moral and political legitimacy. As global perceptions shift and sympathy grows for the Palestinian liberation struggle, the role of memory becomes even more vital. Children raised on truth and dignity do not forget. They carry stories like weapons, like seeds. And when the time comes, they use them to rebuild, to teach, to hold the world accountable. Gaza has long been a synonym for suffering, besieged, bombed, and starved. We have endured nearly 2 decades of blockade, multiple military aggressions, and for the past 2 years, a genocidal war, the most devastating in our lifetime. Hundreds of thousands displaced, entire neighborhoods wiped off the map, families incinerated in their sleep. And yet, amid all of this, we continue to live, to resist, to speak, to demand our rights, to insist on our freedom. Ultimately, Israel's aim is to break the will of Palestinians and make us believe that resistance is worse than futile, that history has abandoned us, that the world has turned its back on us for good. That is the true purpose of the siege and the bombs and the orchestrated hunger, not just to kill bodies, but to kill the generational chain of the Palestinian narrative of dispossession, return, and liberation. And yet the truth survives, and with it, so do we. Israel's current leadership speaks of total victory and finishing the job. We don't aspire to the brute power of our occupiers. We aspire to be steadfast, and there is no algorithm, satellite, or bomb that can measure the power of a people who have decided not to die. Our victory will not come because we are stronger, but because we are more rooted, because we love this land more than anything else, because we know the face of this land like we know the faces of our children, because we have accepted the high price of freedom, and we pay it in grief, in bread shared between tents, in lullabies sung in the streets. We are not waiting for a final judgment from the World Court or a decisive vote at the UN. These are milestones, not destinations. What we are waiting for is the day when the injustice ends, criminals are held accountable, and the world finally recognizes the Palestinians' right of return and right to exercise self-determination throughout our historic homeland. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to remember, to rebuild, to belong, and we know that justice, though delayed, will not be denied forever. When will that day come? Maybe sooner than we think. After 2 years of unrelenting bloodshed in Gaza, the only dignified response is respect for our sacrifice, rather than any attempt to claim credit for our victory. It must also be responded to with sustained, unwavering pressure on governments to halt the killing. The priority now is to end the slaughter and save Gaza and those who remain. Everything else will follow. Those are excerpts from Underdog Palestine Will Prevail by Asim An-Nabih on electronicintifada.net. Asim is the spokesperson for Gaza Municipality and an engineer and PhD researcher currently based in Gaza City. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Gaza and around the world. Al Jazeera's journalist Nora Abu Sitta filmed herself with a group of kids on October 4th. And she asked why they are happy. We want an end to the war, they answer. She then asked them where they want to go, and they say they want to go back to their homes and play with their friends.
انتوا ليش مبسوطين؟ مبسوطين؟ عشان الحرب بدها تخلص؟ يا رب تخلص. وين بدكم ترجعوا؟ وين داركم؟ وأول ما تخلص الحرب شو بدكم تعملوا؟ نلعب مع صحبيات. شو كمان؟ نقعد بدورنا. طب يلا يعني نحكي يا رب تخلص الحرب؟ يا رب تخلص الحرب.
And our contributor Asim An-Nabih, from whose story I just read an excerpt, posted this photo of a tree in East Gaza City on October 3rd. He says, quote, "This is the Sidra tree. Legend says it's 1,000 years old," Asim writes. "Some believe it's a blessed tree, while others believe it grew over the grave of a saint. Palestinians in Gaza say that people have been unable to uproot it over the past centuries, and that its roots extend dozens of meters underground. This tree sits at the intersection overlooking the Sayyid Hashim Mosque, where the tomb of the Prophet's grandfather, peace and blessings be upon him, is located to the south. If you walk a little east of the tree, you'll reach the Al-Hakimiyya neighborhood, where I've lived for half my life. I've never found a neighborhood like it on earth. I passed by the tree today, and memories of a city of roots destroyed by the machine of killing and destruction came flooding back. However, the Gaza tree, impervious to uprooting, spoke volumes that tongues cannot express. This land remains rooted and eternal and will never die." And finally, reporter Saleh Al-Jafarawi captured this clip of the moment he came home and found his cat waiting for him at the door on October 6th. "I missed you," he said to his cat.
إن شاء الله أنا عمالي مروح البيت فبدي أفتح البيت وشوفه ليو اللي هو البس اللي عندي شوف كيف بيكون مستني على الباب الله وين ولا يا فرق وين لك اشتقت لك بس أنا رجعت لك.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. There's so much to take in. Thank you for that comprehensive report as usual. But I think we just have to really be led by the joy of people in
Yes.
Gaza right now.
Yeah.
Their desire for an end to this has to be what our compass, even though we all have a lot of questions. We're going to get into that right now with Jeremy Scahill, but let's just think about what a relief it will be for them for this to come to an end, no matter what enormous obstacles still face them. That is an incredible fact.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. And waking up this morning, West Coast time, to videos of people, like that reporter Saleh, who we've featured for so long, seeing him smile and be with people in the streets. That video that I played at the beginning of members of Gaza's civil defense, the most heroic people on earth, being allowed to just feel joy and relief. These people who have spent every single day of the last 2 years pulling people out of the rubble, trying to save children, trying to do whatever they could with the meager resources they had, and being bombed over and over and over again. Just being able to take a breath, I think, is a good place for us all to start and to look from.
Yeah. Well, let's take a breath now and get on with the program, because we have so much to cover.
There's a lot. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just remind people that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abu Sitta here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman on Wednesday evening, 2 years and a day after the resistance operation and the start of Israel's genocide. On October 7, 2023, US President Donald Trump announced an agreement to bring an end to the slaughter. It has not stopped yet, with the health ministry in Gaza announcing that Israel had killed at least 10 Palestinians and injured dozens more over the last 24 hours. But the announcement has brought joy to Palestinians in Gaza, desperate for an end to Israel's daily massacres, starvation, and destruction. Here's one of the many scenes of joy among people in Gaza on hearing the news. Well, President Trump announced the news on his Truth Social website. He said, "I'm very proud to announce that that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan. This means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line as the first steps toward a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. All parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations in the United States of America. And we thank the mediators Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who worked with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen. Blessed are the peacemakers." President Trump, as usual, understating things. Majid al-Ansari, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry of Qatar, which, as President Trump said, along with Turkey and Egypt, has been mediating the talks in the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh over the last few days, confirmed an agreement, albeit with more cautious language, and he emphasized the benefits for the Palestinian side. Al-Ansari wrote, "The mediators announced that tonight an agreement was reached on all the provisions and implementation mechanisms of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire agreement, which will lead to ending the war, the release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners, and the entry of aid. The details will be announced later." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also announced that an agreement had been reached, but in his post on Twitter, he makes no mention of ending the war, let alone peace. Netanyahu said, "With the approval of the first phase of the plan, all our hostages will be brought home. This is a diplomatic success and a national and moral victory for the state of Israel. From the beginning, I made it clear we will not rest until all our hostages return and all our goals are achieved." Netanyahu speaks as if Israel has in fact achieved all the goals that it set out at the beginning of its genocide, even though it is clear it has not. Instead of destroying Hamas, Israel was forced to negotiate with it. Israel could have had all its prisoners back 2 years ago, but instead has killed dozens of them while committing genocide in Gaza. And under this deal, it may get the bodies back of some of those Israelis it killed. From the Israeli side, the deal has to be approved by the so-called Security Cabinet, and that meeting is scheduled for tonight. For its part, Hamas released a statement saying the agreement stipulated, quote, an end to the war on Gaza, the occupation's withdrawal from it, the entry of aid, and a prisoner exchange. Hamas also thanked Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey and Trump for their mediation efforts and called on Trump and others to, quote, compel the occupation government to fully implement the agreement's requirements. We salute our great people in the Gaza Strip, Jerusalem, the West Bank, who have demonstrated unparalleled pride, heroism, and honor, Hamas said. These great sacrifices and stances have thwarted the Israeli occupation's plan for subjugation and displacement. Hamas added that it, quote, will not abandon our people's national rights to achieve freedom, independence, and self-determination. What we can say 2 years into the genocide is that despite the horrific death and destruction Israel has inflicted, and for which Israel and its backers, not the resistance, bear full and complete responsibility, Israel's fantasies of expelling the population of Gaza and resettling it appear to have crumbled. Israel is left with a devastated economy, a depleted and demoralized army, and it is absolutely hated, despised, and isolated around the world. At the same time, the legitimacy of the Palestinian struggle for liberation has never been higher or enjoyed wider support. But no one should be under any illusions. Israel remains highly dangerous and desperate. This reported agreement is, as noted, only a first phase. It addresses none of the bigger questions in Trump's so-called 20-point peace plan released last week. Those issues include a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, the future governance of Gaza, and American plans to try to impose neo-colonial rule by Tony Blair, and the disarmament of the weapons of the resistance while Israel gets to keep its weapons of genocide. Despite Trump's bombast, we are very far from anything that resembles peace. That doesn't matter to Palestinians in Gaza who are celebrating today and deserve to celebrate what we hope will be an imminent end to the slaughter. But clearly, there is a lot to unpack and understand about what's happening, and we're joined now by Jeremy Scahill. He is the co-founder of Dropsite News, where he has been closely following the negotiations and reporting exclusive stories from Palestinian resistance sources. On the 7th of October, just 2 days ago, he published an exclusive interview with Moussa Abu Marzouk, a senior member of Hamas. Jeremy, welcome back to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Ali, it's my honor to be with you.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Nora. Great to see you too.
You too.
Thanks, Jeremy. In your latest story published last night on Dropsite News, you quote a senior Hamas official confirming that, quote, from our side, yes, the Palestinians reached an agreement, but they still needed to finalize some points. And a second source told you, it's over, it's been decided, everybody's agreed on it. Well, there's still a lot of questions to answer. What is your understanding of exactly what has been agreed in this so-called first phase, what remains to be agreed, and what we can expect to see over the next few days? What were some of the key calculations for the resistance, and what are you learning in particular about which Palestinians may be released from Israeli prisons?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's helpful to understand something that often is totally unmentioned in broader corporate Western media coverage, and that is while Hamas is leading the negotiations throughout the course of the genocide, when it's gone into these processes to try to negotiate the exchange of captives, issues surrounding aid, a ceasefire or withdrawal, they consult with a wide range of other political actors in Palestine. You know, it's a very diverse tapestry of political perspective, mobilizations, organizations. And that has intensified really greatly since Israel blew up that original January ceasefire deal. And so, just to back up a little bit here, on August 18th, Hamas and the resistance, with the full support of every basically political entity in Palestine except Fatah and the Palestinian Authority, made major concessions in what was called the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 framework. This was the deal that Israel and the United States demanded the Palestinians accept in return for ending the genocide. They accepted that deal on August 18th. Israel did not formally respond to it at all. The United States ignored it. And the official response of Israel came in the form of an attempt to assassinate the entire negotiating delegation of Hamas in a series of airstrikes in Doha, Qatar. And those strikes failed to kill any of the senior Hamas leadership. They killed several office workers and assistants in that strike, but they also killed the son of 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿, who has lost other sons to this war inside of Gaza. They injured 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿's wife. This is the political leader of Hamas outside of the Strip right now, and the lead negotiator, and wounded his daughter-in-law and multiple grandchildren. That was Israel's response to Hamas's acceptance with major concessions of a deal just weeks ago that the United States has said was the deal that would end this. So 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 then leads the negotiating delegation and has to sit in a room not so far from the very Israelis who tried to assassinate him and in fact did kill his son and wounded multiple members of his family, including his grandchildren in that strike. Dr. Mohammed al-Hindi, the lead political negotiator from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also joined the negotiating delegation because Saraya al-Quds, the armed wing of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, is also holding an unknown number of those Israeli captives or bodies. And then you also had representatives of the leftist PFLP who also formally joined the negotiation. This was an unusual development. And what this showed was that the Palestinians were trying to send a message that they were not just speaking on behalf of Hamas, but that these groups were representing a broader cross-section of Palestinian society. And what had happened in these deliberations among the Palestinians once they were given Trump's so-called 20-point plan is that they came to a decision through deliberation and also with consulting with the ground commanders in Gaza from the armed forces, the Palestinian armed forces, as well as the political leadership inside of Gaza. And there was a debate. There was part of the camp that said we should reject this for all the reasons you were laying out, Ali. This is a neo-colonialist plan. This is an attempt to force the surrender of the Palestinian cause of self-determination, liberation, and ultimate statehood. And then there were others who were saying, our only options right now are to continue the war and to continue that war now that all of these Arab countries have been cajoled, blackmailed, or willingly went along with the Trump narrative, that it would be fully supported by the United States, and that the sort of devil's bargain that they might have to engage in, or this gamble, was to try to see if they could thread a needle. And what they came up with was an extraordinary political response. It was short, but it was quite sophisticated. The Palestinians came back and they said, listen, we accept the basic framework of Trump's plan to end the Gaza war, to end the Gaza genocide. And Hamas and Islamic Jihad, as the lead combatants in fighting against Israel in this war, have the mandate of Palestine to negotiate an end to this war because we're the ones fighting it and we hold the captives. But for these other issues involving Tony Blair, involving the deployment of a foreign force, involving disarmament, because it's not just about Hamas giving up weapons. What Israel is trying to do is win through this agreement what it has systematically failed to achieve in Gaza, which is forcing the surrender of the Palestinian people. It's not just about Hamas. They are trying to strip the entire population of Palestine of the right to armed resistance. And so what the Palestinians came back with was to say, let's talk about captives, let's talk about aid, let's talk about the genocide, and let's talk about the withdrawal of Israeli forces. All of these other issues need to be deferred, and they need to involve the participation of every political actor within Palestinian society representing a democratic will of the Palestinian people. That was the response. Shockingly, to some Palestinian negotiators, Trump responds to this and says, great news, Hamas has responded positively, and it seems like they want peace and we can make a deal. So then you had all the delegations descending on Sharm el-Sheikh, and I was told by Palestinian resistance sources who were involved with the negotiations that unprecedented pressure was being put on the Palestinians primarily by Egypt and Turkey. Qatar, I'm told, was a little more neutral and kept emphasizing this has to be a Palestinian decision. But Egypt and Turkey were basically saying, you need to make a deal here. In the end, they also acknowledged it was a Palestinian decision, but I was told there was immense pressure. And so what they looked at was how to address ending the genocide. That was the immediate challenge in front of them without sacrificing any of the rights of Palestinians to exist or to resist. And so what they did is they made a massive concession. They said, we are willing to hand over all of the living and deceased Israeli captives without a very clear timeline for the withdrawal of all Israeli occupation forces. They accepted only this initial, Abu Marzouk compared it to drawing maps of like camel races. He was almost mocking the maps that were released as part of this proposal. But if you look at it, the map that Trump released, it's a very slight pullback or redeployment of Israeli forces deep into Gaza. So the Israelis have agreed to withdraw forces from some population centers. The Palestinians were able to win some concessions to get them a little bit further back in some areas where they were going to dip deeply into population areas, but it still is very entrenched in Gaza. And so they'll withdraw to that line as part of the process of the exchange of captives. The next stages of Israeli withdrawal are going to be linked to all of those other issues that the Palestinians succeeded in deferring, and they're hoping that it will be with a much broader cross-section of Palestinian society. So they're going to hand over the Israelis. There is some issue of whether they can track down all of these deceased bodies. As you mentioned, Ali, the Israelis killed many of their own captives that were being held by the resistance. And in some cases, Hamas has said, we don't know the precise location, or they're in buildings that were bombed by Israel, or they're in tunnels that were demolished by Israel, or we had buried them temporarily in proper cemeteries alongside Palestinians that you now have bulldozed. In fact, Abu Marzouk said that the graves of his own parents were bulldozed by the Israelis when they razed Rafah to the ground. So there was an issue of whether this was going to hold up any sort of an agreement. It seems like they've agreed that maybe even some international forensic experts are going to come in to try to go and track down some of those bodies. In return, Trump's plan said that there would be 250 Palestinians that have been sentenced to life terms. It's in Israeli prisons, gulags, jails, torture centers, and then 1,700 Palestinians that had been seized from Gaza in the aftermath of October 7th. My understanding from resistance sources is that there may be well over 4,000 Palestinians that were taken by Israel, either because they were captured during the Al-Aqsa flood operation, or they were literally kidnapped to use for this purpose, for an exchange of captives. And you have several hundred children, and you have women. And so it says in the agreement that all of the women and children are going to be released as part of this exchange. There's been a very intense battle going on right up to the moment that I'm speaking to you now, because the Palestinian resistance has put forward always at the top of the list the Palestinian sentence to the longest sentences. We're talking about people like Marwan Barghouti, who many believe could win a democratic election to become head of state of independent Palestine. He's not from Hamas, he's from Fatah. And he's serving 5 life sentences. You have Ahmed Sadat, who is from the PFLP, who's also serving multiple life sentences and is in fact the official leader of the PFLP, which is a left-wing Palestinian political movement. Again, not Hamas, but at the top of the list. Abdullah Barghouti, who is serving a longer sentence than any other Palestinian, 5,200-year sentence, 67 life sentences, and the list goes on from there. So the Palestinians have said one of the goals of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood on October 7th was to liberate these Palestinian prisoners, and so they've always put them forward, and there's others too serving multiple life sentences. The Israelis have systematically said we will not allow these people to be released. The Palestinians are pushing back very hard. Maybe they're going to succeed in getting some of them out. But just one vignette that I was told by a Palestinian close to the negotiations is that their assessment was that if they were dealing with Biden's people, there was an ideological commitment to Zionism, and that the Biden officials in these things actually would adopt the Israeli position about Marwan Barghouti or Abdullah Barghouti or Ahmed Sadat. And I was told that the Trump people don't even seem to really understand who these people are or their relevance. And at one point, they said that they had heard that the Americans were saying to the Israelis, well, but we're talking about 5 or 6 guys, just let them out, and which, of course, I'm sure infuriated Ron Dermer. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to succeed, but it just kind of shows you the dynamics at play here, the difference between dealing with Trump's people and dealing with Biden's people. The end result may be the same. Maybe none of these guys are going to be freed, but they're fighting very hard for it. So that issue is really that, and some technical details about the maps are happening. I think it's going to get resolved. I don't think this is going to derail the agreement. But to close my sort of long-winded explanation here, the short of it is this. Palestinian resistance sources are saying that they understand they're taking a very dangerous, calculated risk because it ultimately boils down to Trump and whether or not Trump is going to compel the Israelis to end the genocide. Whether Trump, and just as we were going on the air, Trump told a press conference that informally was taking place at a cabinet meeting that he has ended the war in Gaza. That was something the mediators told the Palestinian side he was going to say publicly, that he is ending the war in Gaza. And he just said it as we were coming onto the air. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean they're going to still let Israel mow the lawn, quote unquote? That they're going to be continuously bombing as they do in Lebanon and as they've done in previous ceasefires? Probably it means that for now. But does it mean that Trump is serious about getting all of those Israeli forces out of Gaza? Could be, but we don't know. So the Palestinians feel like what they succeeded in doing here was listening to the will of the people of Gaza, who wanted an end to this genocide and wanted a deal, overwhelmingly wanted a deal to happen. They didn't necessarily want the Trump deal, and that's why they didn't accept the Trump deal. They accepted a tactical, narrow aspect of this, which they felt was a strategic victory for them because they've deferred these questions so they can try to make sure that all Palestinians have a say in what comes next. They also didn't surrender. They also didn't agree to disarmament or demilitarization. And Mohammed al-Hindi, who, as I said, is the top political negotiator for Islamic Jihad, he told me soon before this agreement that if Israel violates the agreement, we'll have our weapons, we'll have our resilience, we'll have our steadfastness, and we will have means to resist them. We are not going to surrender to them, and they haven't surrendered. So they're facing a very uncertain political path because of the nature of Trump, because of the bloodthirsty, genocidal nature of Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is still messaging to his public that he's going to continue his war of annihilation. But there may be a configuration of interests that have to do with Trump's ego, that have to do with profit, that have to do with the fact that Jared Kushner is getting bankrolled by Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. That Trump wants this because he thinks he's going to get his Riviera. That Trump cares more about his family business than he does Zionism on a kind of micro level. This is a committed Zionist administration in Washington, but Trump is an erratic and unusual character. So, and the Palestinian negotiators these are incredibly intelligent and sophisticated people, and they understand the man that they're dealing with. And I think that their perspective is they had to take some hits to the jaw in what they negotiated, but they felt that they did the best they could for the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. That's their perspective.
Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, there's so many. First of all, Jeremy, you brilliantly answered all the questions I threw at you, and some of the ones that we're still wanted to ask, but we're going to dig deeper on all of them. I mean, just on that last point that you put, that a lot depends on Trump and on his ego and on his erratic nature and all of that. And nobody doubts that. Moussa Abu Marzouk said that in the interview that you did with him in the last few days. They understand his erratic nature, and they said, but everyone is dealing with that. Israel is also dealing with his erratic nature. But what about, what is it about this moment? Because a lot of the things you said were true in March when Trump allowed Israel to violate the ceasefire and return to full-scale genocide. A lot of those things were true in May when Hamas made another calculated gamble, or the resistance factions together made a calculated gamble and agreed to release the Israeli-American prisoner of war, Edan Alexander, in exchange for what they thought was a firm promise from the Americans that they would make Israel stop the genocide, and then Israel, the United States reneged on that. They didn't deliver. What I want to ask you is there something different about Israel's position now, in the sense that the Trump administration, notwithstanding Trump's personal idiosyncrasies, but the United States, let's say, and Israel's other staunch allies, the European powers or European non-powers, now see stopping this Holocaust as the only way to save Israel? In other words, is this a recognition of Israel's weakness on their part? It's notable, for example, as you said, Trump is talking about peace, about an end to the war. The Europeans are also talking about an end to the war. These are words they never wanted to use before. They never even wanted to talk about a ceasefire. They didn't want to use the word ceasefire. They would say truce. So is it also a recognition of Israel's strategic weakness? And my goodness, if we don't stop this now, Israel is going to go down the tubes completely.
Yeah, I mean, and no one covers the sort of actions and tactics of the armed resistance in Gaza better than this program and Jon Elmer's analyses. But I think the first factor we have to recognize here is that a nuclear armed serial killer masquerading as a nation state with the full backing of the United States has failed to impose a surrender on Palestinians wearing, Adidas flip-flops, tracksuits, and operating with largely domestically manufactured weapons. They have failed to militarily defeat the armed Palestinian resistance, primarily from Qassam brigades and Soraya al-Quds. And I think that, while Trump may not dig into the minutia of all of this and why it happens, he's looking at a situation where these Israeli captives are not going anywhere. They're in the hands of the Palestinian resistance. Netanyahu, who he's given carte blanche since he blew up the ceasefire agreement in March, is just succeeding only at one thing: killing large numbers of Palestinians, burning them alive in tents, inflaming the world. You have unprecedented isn't even a strong enough word, opposition to Israel in the world today. And so he's looking at that. And he himself said the other day that he sort of sees it as Netanyahu has driven Israel into the ground and Trump's giving them a lifeline, a lifeboat. But there's also domestic political considerations. Look at what's happening within his base. You're starting to see very prominent people that played a role in Trump's rise taking very strong stands against Israel and being concerned about the role of Israel in American politics. And so even in Trump world, the dynamics are shifting. I think what's different about, some of the other stages you were talking about is that Trump was much more susceptible to the ultra Zionist, players within his orbit and the people that had helped to bankroll his runs for the presidency. And I think that, he was also bombarded with the same kind of propaganda and images and films, et cetera, that Biden and others were bombarded with, during the last administration. So I think part of it is domestic. Part of it is that they realize Israel's not winning this war in military terms. Those are real factors. And I think that Trump, genuinely feels like he's wasting his time now on this. He has other things he wants to deal with. And I think he wants the glory of, I ended a war. He constantly talks about 3,000 years, no one's been able to solve it. And now I've solved it. I genuinely think that man is so thin-skinned on the one hand, but arrogant and egotistical on the other. He's obsessed with the fact that Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize. I think he remains obsessed with that. So these are insane things to even be talking about as like motivations for a head of state of the United States, but they're real. These are real things. But at the end of the day, I think all of us need to be cognizant of the fact that Israel's genocidal agenda remains active. They may view this as a tactical or technical setback right now, but the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and all of Palestinian territories, remain in the sniper scope of an incredibly dangerous serial killer. And I don't get the sense from any Palestinian involved with negotiating this that they are, whistling past that reality. They see it, and they're saying that what happens next is crucial. And we're going to have to see what the decrepit, unpopular Mahmoud Abbas has to say about any of this. We're going to have to see how Europe responds. I was watching Macron speaking right before we went on the air, and they're all leading with this thing about Hamas needs to go away, and there needs to be a disarmament. What they're actually saying is, we want Palestinians to fully surrender. We want Palestinians to give up on their actual aspirations and to exist in a European endorsed Bantustan in all of Palestine, and to do it willingly. They say, oh, Hamas has to go away. Hamas remains, if not the single most popular political party in all of Palestine, not just Gaza. It's certainly one of them, are competing for it, even after everything that's happened the past 2 years, and even because of it in some cases. So you can't erase, if you say Hamas needs to go away and you want to erase HAMAS, or you want to say that acronym is gone, okay, try it. But that doesn't mean that they aren't representing a part of the fabric of Palestinian society. And if you believe in democracy, your position can't be, if the wrong people win, we sanction you, isolate you, confine you to a concentration camp, mow the lawn, and then commit a genocide on you when you dare to stand up and say, no, we have a right to resist occupation. That's what Europe is saying right now. And so what comes next is either going to go in the direction of some neo-Oslo process, which would be horribly depressing to so many Palestinians, because it means that they just drag something on while Israel annexes more, steals more, kills more, or Palestinians unite and then they put a challenge before the world. Are you going to go down in history as the people that continued to support this apartheid regime even after you recognize they committed a genocide against the Palestinian people?
Yeah, and of course, Macron and Starmer and everyone, no one is ever daring to suggest that Israel be the one to disarm. Yeah. And I mean, the perpetrators of the worst genocide we've seen in our modern history, they just get to carry on as usual, of course. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the possible guarantees, like what, as you said, Hamas and the Palestinian resistance is taking an enormous risk, just in agreeing to release the Israeli captives. What guarantees are being talked about in order to ensure, I don't even know if that's a word either, that Israel doesn't just say, okay, we got our captives back and now we're going to finish the job in Gaza. I mean, is there any discussion on what guarantees could be and what they could look like?
I can answer that because I want to just be really factual about this. The way I'm going to answer that is by telling you what I was told the Palestinians were told. Now, I'm not saying that this is reality or what's going to be implemented, but I'm going to share what I heard about why they accepted this deal and in terms of those guarantees. The head of Turkish intelligence goes to Sharm el-Sheikh and also had been involved with the earlier deliberations that were taking place in Qatar among the Palestinians as they decided how to respond to Trump. And then you had the prime minister and foreign minister, the same person of Qatar, join as well, and then the head of Egyptian intelligence. And they gathered with 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿 and the other Palestinians, and they said that they have firm assurances from Trump that they believe themselves that he is not going to allow Israel to resume the genocide. And there was a lot of discussion about that, and there was requests for certain things on paper and other things. At the end of the day, even a piece of paper, is irrelevant. And I think that the calculation that the Palestinian resistance was left to sort of embrace was that all of these Arab and Islamic countries have put themselves out and said, we are guaranteeing this agreement. And Trump is coming out and saying that he is ending the Gaza war. The stakes for this entire configuration or constellation of the Arab states, Islamic states, and Trump, that it would be very difficult then for Trump to justify allowing Israel to do a full-scale military onslaught again against Gaza. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But I think that was, in real political terms, I think it was the fact that you had some some of the most the most influential Muslim countries in the world saying we're endorsing this also. Now you can say these people are, these governments do the bidding of the West, and they were silent for 2 years, and they sat on their hands, and they only issued strongly worded statements. And some of them, like Jordan, and participated in, defending Israel against the defensive attacks that Iran, launched. All of those questions are real. None of Palestinians know this way better than I do, and they're saying we know all of this. When you push back on it, they say, yes, we understand all of that. But again, they're saying we have a genocide of our people. We need to end that, and we can, but we have to end it while preserving the struggle. And they felt that they did it, but a lot of this rests on the credibility now of those Arab and Islamic nations. These should not be viewed as just kind of bystanders or mediators. In a sense, the entire governance of the Islamic world that is oriented toward American influence. We're not talking about Iran or Ansar Allah in Yemen, or the resistance in Lebanon. But much of the Arab and Islamic world that deals with the West in this way, they've now put their necks out and they've said, we are guaranteeing this. The populations in all of these countries are watching this. And Hamas's popularity is very high, in many, many countries. And the idea of resisting Israel is higher than it's ever been. Dissatisfaction with the posture of Arab and Islamic states is quite negative, quite high. People are very angry that this has gone on. So I think those dynamics played into it, Nora. And again, there is no real guarantee, and they know that. Giving up all of the Israeli captives, it's a huge gamble. But as Mohammed al-Hindi pointed out, when I was saying, like, isn't this your only leverage? And he said, on a tactical negotiation level, in terms of them agreeing to sit down with us or having to sit down with us, yes. But our steadfastness is the other leverage that we have. Mm. And I think there's validity to that, because Israel hasn't militarily defeated them. They've militarily slaughtered tens of thousands of Palestinians.
Yeah.
I just want to dig deeper a bit on the so-called mediators. For the first almost 2 years of this genocide, we kept hearing that Egypt and Qatar are the mediators, and the negotiations were either in Doha or in Cairo. Now Turkey is involved. Talk about how and why Turkey became involved and what its role is. And also, you mentioned Jared Kushner on the Israeli-American side has become involved. Of course, he's Donald Trump's son-in-law, a ardent and committed and fanatical Zionist who is also, his businesses, as you noted, are funded by many of these Arab Gulf regimes. So we can see kind of the swamp we're dealing with. But talk about the roles of those different parties. And I also want to talk about, we want to talk about Tony Blair and all that. We can talk about that too in the other parts of the 20-point plan. But at least Turkey, Kushner, and the mediators, what are you seeing there?
I mean, Turkey, if you look at the past several years, 5-6 years under Erdogan in Turkey, there's been, and even you can go back even further to that, as Turkey started to get involved a decade ago, much more deeply in East Africa, and asserting itself as a player in the world of diplomacy, and also in geopolitical questions. And I think that regarding Gaza and regarding Trump, I think Erdogan in particular wants to create a very complicated relationship between Turkey and Trump. I think that Erdogan's rhetoric about Gaza is militantly pro-Palestine, in fact, openly pro-resistance. He defended Hamas as a legitimate organization on the world stage. Behind the scenes, he does business with Israel. I think that he and Trump are cut from the same cloth in some ways. And I think that Erdogan recognized that Turkey's position in the world between Europe, part of NATO, gateway to the Islamic and Arab world in many significant ways, that Turkey had a chance to assert itself in a very serious way here, while also currying favor with Trump. And so what I understand is that the head of Turkish intelligence was a major pressure actor in this when he stepped onto the scene. And I think Trump felt very satisfied and credited Turkey multiple times as being, if not the decisive player, one of the top decisive players in getting Hamas to agree to this. So I think Turkey also is I think Erdogan is recognizing that this is part of Turkey's campaign to expand its influence in the world and in the world of diplomacy, and certainly in Syria. Turkey is a massive, massive player, and I think Erdogan really is looking at expanding that kind of influence. In the case of Qatar, huge business deals have gone on between the United States and Qatar, but also directly with the Trump family. And I think that, you know, the description that I've had of the Qataris in these negotiations, I get the sense that the Palestinians feel like they have been the most honest brokers of all of these characters in the room. But, you know, Qatar just signed this unprecedented NATO Article 5 type agreement with the United States right after, I'm certain, Trump either allowed or was part of the plot to try to assassinate the Hamas leadership. I mean, it's almost impossible to believe that he didn't either greenlight it or allow it to happen, because Qatar has U.S. air defenses. It's the head of CENTCOM. You know, just they mysteriously, American planes were able to bomb them and American air defense systems didn't take them down. Set that aside, though. Qatar is looking pretty good in its relationship with the United States and had to eat some crow. Oh, we're not going to respond to a country that just bombed us. Okay. Egypt, though, Sisi is committed a coup, overthrew the democratically elected government of Mohamed Morsi, who was very militantly pro-Palestine, comes from the Muslim Brotherhood movement. Morsi dies in prison. Sisi has been backed by the United States, is bankrolled. His regime, in some ways, is holding on by a thread. I'm not predicting it's going to get overthrown tomorrow, but there's fragility there. And when you talk to really sharp Egyptian analysts, they'll say there's a fragility to that regime that may not be apparent to the outside world, but it exists. And there's a population within Egypt that was capable of electing a Muslim Brotherhood member as head of state the only time they've been allowed to participate in a democratic election. Egypt has its own security interests. It has its own complicated relationship with Israel. It has its own history of being adversarial, but also collaborative with Israel. Egypt has an interest in a severely weakened Islamic resistance existing in Gaza, but not being eliminated for its own security interests. So all of these countries have their own motivations, combined then with massive amounts of money they see at play here if they're able to get the prime positions in some kind of Tony Blair neo-colonialist attempt to do what the neocons thought they were going to do in Iraq when they invaded in 2003, wipe the place clean, build it up in this free market capitalist way, but make sure that like 10% goes to the big guy. And we're not talking about Biden this time. We're talking about, you know, the Trump family and others. So, you know, it's a complicated web. And you hear, I'm not saying anything about because they believe in Palestinian self-determination. I don't even think that's really the motivation. I think that, you know, maybe some of them individually, you get a sense that some of the Qatari officials are speaking sincerely, but it's their populations that want to hear that. What they're talking about is geopolitics, their own influence, their relationship with Trump, their relationship with the United States, their standing in the world, the defense systems that they can get. What kind of support are they going to have if they have to face uprising against their own, you know, their own people against them? These are the considerations at play here.
Jeremy, let's talk. I know people hate talking about it because of all the obvious reasons, but the Tony Blair colonial plan is, you know, it seems like it might be dead in the water. We haven't seen much movement since last week about it. Where do you see this like, you know, this resurgence?
I don't think it's dead in the water.
No, okay,
I don't think it's dead in the water. Yeah. I mean, I understand why people may think that that's the case. What I was told by Palestinian negotiators is that they've been told that like immediately following the release of the captives, there's an expectation from the White House that negotiations are going to start on these other phases of the plan. And, you know, when we started off talking today, I was explaining what I was told was the resistance perspective on how to respond to Trump, which was to break it into two basic parts. And that seems like it's heading toward resolution, but it's also linked to this whole other aspect of it. I think that Trump really believes that he's going to move forward with this. There's going to be questions about, are they going to deploy an international force? Is Israel actually going to accept or go along with the deployment of armed Arab forces, in Gaza? Do they think that like some soldiers from the United Arab Emirates are going to go and disarm the Qassam brigades or Soraya al-Quds? Like, how do they envision this working? Do they think that there's not going to be an incident where the Israelis end up doing a drone strike and they kill international forces? And yet the plan says that Israel only has to withdraw from other areas after they're done with this initial phase once an international force takes over and it's certified that disarmament has taken place in the area. That's a massive clause of this. Yeah. So what that means is that they're as of now, what they're saying is there has to be an international force there.
So doesn't that mean this is, aside from the first phase, which we've seen people in Gaza celebrating, they want an end to the massacres and the bombing. They desperately need aid to come in. Nobody's arguing with that. But then isn't this destined to run aground as soon as we get to that next phase? Because disarmament is off the table for the resistance, and it would make no sense for them to agree to disarmament while Israel is not only fully armed but continues to occupy Gaza.
Yeah.
And of course, leave aside what it's doing in the West Bank, allowing in a Tony Blair-run colonial dictatorship with the participation of Arab collaborators or Palestinian Authority goons trained by Egypt and Jordan runs fundamentally counter to any notion of Palestinian self-determination that the resistance has vowed to protect. And yet it's impossible to see Israel moving off its position without massive international pressure. But that so-called international community is all behind this plan. So is it just too early to say, or can we say that the chances of failure are far higher than the chances of success of any subsequent phases?
I mean, look, I actually would be very interested in your answer on this. I mean, I'm, compared to you, Ali, I mean, I'm a fairly newcomer to this. I mean, I just have to, in full disclosure, I had not been a reporter that had been focused on Palestine, and I always considered that an area that people had to be all in to be covering it, and I was covering other issues, but I felt I've always been active and spoken out about Palestine, but journalistically, when I witnessed the events of October 7th and the aftermath, I felt like I needed to pour all of my focus into this. So I just want that disclaimer that I don't claim to be a lifelong Palestine expert. I've always cared deeply about Palestine, but as a journalist, I've been doing this for 2 years. So with that disclaimer that I'm sitting with experts, and I'm the least expert in the room right now. I think it's implausible that they would be able to successfully implement this just based on the history of Palestine and Palestinian resistance. I think it was Mardawi, the Hamas official, that said when the Tony Blair thing came out, he was interviewed on Al Jazeera, and he said, under what circumstances is Blair going to be arriving? As a Palestinian? As a continuation of Balfour, as a colonialist? What is his legitimacy in coming into Palestine? And it was on the one hand, it was he was making fun of it, but on the other hand, the core issue is there. You're going to put in the man who was one of the architects of the Iraq War, who is on the payroll of dictators and despots around the world, who is an unindicted war criminal for his crimes against Muslim people already. He's going to be the guy coming to recolonize Palestine. So just baked into it, it's farcical on its surface. On a technical level, though, what they're saying, if you read it carefully, is we're going to allow Palestinians to pretend that they're making decisions. Hamas and the resistance have said that Hamas will relinquish governing authority to a committee of independent Palestinian technocrats. And they put forward recommendations along with other Palestinian bodies. And these are people with experience in diplomacy or in governance. So they've said they'll do it. But in the Trump plan, Blair and this peace board would actually be overseeing those Palestinians. So what they've done is they've taken something that actually could work, where you say, clearly the place has been razed to the ground in this genocide, and there needs to be a reconfiguration and discussion among Palestinian society of how are we going to move forward with governance. That's not what they're doing. They're saying the most popular party in Palestine is not allowed to be here anymore. Palestinian people are not allowed to defend themselves with any weapons. We're going to give you a pretend council, but we're going to have the veto power over it indefinitely. I don't think the Palestinian people are going to accept this, but I do think they're going to try to move forward with it. And what I think we're going to see in the coming weeks is they're going to try to box Hamas and the resistance entirely out of these discussions. They're going to try to circumvent them. And what they're going to realize at the end of the day is that while Hamas started as a Islamic resistance movement, it controversially became a political party, and it won democratic elections. Palestinian Islamic Jihad did not become a political party running in those kinds of elections. They've always maintained the resistance identity. Hamas, though, does a number of things. They were governing. They did policing. They did the payroll. They did picking up the garbage. They ran civil services. When you say, it's like what happened in Iraq, when you issue these de-Baathification orders, anyone connected to the Ba'ath Party, you're no longer allowed to participate in the life of society anymore. You're removing the expert class. You're removing the people that knew how to run the government. Palestinians have a diverse array of opinions about Hamas. Those should be issues for Palestinians to discuss, not for any of the rest of us. But the reality is they're going to need Hamas's expertise. They're going to need Hamas to help with security. And if they do this disastrous attempt at mimicking de-Baathification, they're going to ending up coming begging, saying, wait a minute, these people that used to be part of Hamas, we want you back into the equation. I think Hamas people are kind of aware of that. They're saying gladly we'll give up governance. They've been begging to do it in any of these deals because Osama Hamdan told me it's an albatross around our neck. And many within the Hamas movement feel it was a mistake to become the governing authority. I'm not saying it's a dominant opinion. I'm saying many people have made that point. Maybe it was a mistake. So on a technical level, I think they're going to try it, but it's disastrous in its in its design.
I think, Jeremy, since you did ask me for my opinion, one thing I think is important to say is that already we saw, as you mentioned, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, come out and reassert these points just in the past hour or so at a press conference with various Arab foreign ministers saying Hamas can have no role, Hamas must be disarmed. Of course, he didn't say anything about Israel being disarmed. And then Germany, which has been one of the biggest enablers of this genocide, came out and they said, oh, we're going to host a donor conference for the reconstruction of Gaza. So all of these countries that enabled the genocide fully are now trying to rebrand themselves as the saviors of Gaza, as the ones who are going to help rebuild it, when in fact all of this is the apparatus, all of this aid and reconstruction and development, which of course they will control, is the apparatus for recolonizing Gaza and simply rebranding Israeli occupation as international support, which is exactly what happened in Iraq. I mean, that was I think the terminal decline of the United Nations is when Kofi Annan, the Secretary General at the time, allowed the United Nations to become a fig leaf for Israeli occupation, US and British and Ukrainian and other occupation of Iraq, all those countries that were involved in that occupation. And that's the danger now. And then they start talking about peace and two-state solution and apple pie and rehabilitating Israel. We're going to see a rush of European leaders to Tel Aviv, meeting with 𝐓𝐡𝐿 Herzog and saying, now Israel is okay again. They're going to try to rehabilitate Israel and say, well, we have to talk to Israel because we can't have a future and we can't have peace unless we talk to Israel. And this is an enormous danger. And we have to ensure that Israel's pariah status is maintained, that its isolation is maintained, that the pursuit of its war criminals and other war criminals is accelerated, and that it just doesn't go back to business as usual, a la the Oslo process, now as an endless ceasefire process in which Israel is in control. So what I want to get to is really to tell everyone who's watching that it's going to be very easy when we see a ceasefire, hopefully a ceasefire, hopefully aid flooding in, hopefully people in Gaza celebrating. This is not over. You have to keep protesting, escalating, putting pressure, because the global movement, the global uprising for Palestine is the strategic depth of the Palestinian people. That, not the word of Donald Trump, not the word of Qatar or Recep Tayyip Erdogan or Sisi, is the guarantor of the rights of the Palestinian people. So that's really what I want to stress, is no matter what happens in the next few days or weeks, without that global pressure, without the heroism, I beg to differ with Greta Thunberg, without the heroism of the people who've gone on the flotillas, without the heroism of people going out into the streets of the UK and saying, I support Palestine action, which is an absolutely moral position that I'm happy to repeat on this on this live stream. I don't know if that will get us banned in the UK. I'm sorry. But, I'm just saying, supporting civil disobedience against genocide is a morally right position. It's the position Martin Luther King would have taken when he said that sometimes you have, normally we obey the law, but you have to sometimes disobey immoral laws. And that's what people in Britain and other parts of the world are doing. All of this is to say that has to continue. Don't let things go back to business as usual. Don't let these monsters, these lizards who did this, now refashion themselves as the instruments of peace and reconstruction. And I apologize again to lizards.
No.
Which are beautiful. I always tell
Very
my
sweet
dad this,
creatures.
because we see lizards in Jordan, and I always tell him lizards are wonderful creatures, and it's very good luck if you see one in your home. And so again, I did not mean to impugn beautiful lizards.
I'm sure lizards around the world, Ali, are very relieved to hear your clarification. One note to add to that very important analysis is that what's been happening in the occupied West Bank is gravely serious. The largest mass expulsion and displacement campaign since 1967, and in some way, as I was hearing you, Ali, or listening to you, in some ways, it's more important now than ever for people to remain vigilant, because all of these crimes have been exposed, because the momentum is there. That the risk always is that if there's the appearance of peace, the veneer of, the Gaza thing has been ended, in so many ways, it's just beginning. The fight for the future of Palestine, this chapter might be coming to some resolution in a limited way, but the book is still vast and unwritten. And if people drop the attention span or don't realize there has never been this level of momentum for Palestine ever in history, it has never existed. The serial killer masquerading as a head of state has never been more cornered by world opinion, even within the Republican Party. In the United States, there is unprecedented dissatisfaction with the role that Israel plays in American politics and on the world stage. These are so many unthinkable developments have occurred as a result of October 7th. And I just want to second what you so articulately said, Ali, in saying that more vigilance now has to be deployed. If you actually care about this, then you stick with it, because that's what every Palestinian I know is saying. Even if the bombs stop falling, don't forget us. Don't forget us now. So I think in many ways that is the battle cry from Palestinians now, is don't abandon us and think that because 600 trucks a day start coming in, or we're allowed to put up a tent without it being set on fire by an American missile launched by Israel, that it's over. It's not over. In many ways, it's just beginning.
Jeremy, we could go on for a long time, but I think that's a perfect place to leave this discussion right now. Thank you for all your extraordinary work documenting these negotiations. I have been relying on your work for a very long time in terms of staying abreast of what's happening, and we still have a lot more to learn from you. So we'll be watching your reporting at Dropsite News, which is where people can find it, and we hope you'll also come back again and talk to us here at the Electronic Intifada.
Always. I'm always like, whenever I see a communication from one of you asking me on the show, I get a little jolt of energy through me, in part because I know how many people in Palestine watch this program. And I feel honored to be invited to also speak to the Palestinian audience that I know is very dedicated to this program. So thank you all for all of your vital and urgent work.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Oh, yeah. There's still so many discussion topics we could have launched into, but this is a long and protracted road. There will be so much more to. I mean, I keep thinking about, like, what is the world going to look like a week from now? Is this first phase going to succeed? What happens next? We just have to keep vigilant. We can't let up our guard, and I know we'll keep tracking this. Before we go to Jon, we were able to speak with our contributor Donya Abu Sitta in Gaza just about 24 hours before airtime, and we have a short interview with her. This was on the eve, of course, of the ceasefire announcement.
It was the same day, but it was the morning.
Right.
So
that's right.
It was.
Time's right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a long. It was, let's say, a few hours before the announcement. People were anticipating it, but it hadn't come yet. So that's the context. But just so people are clear about that.
Great. Okay, so here's a short interview we did with Donya, and then we'll be back with Jon. Can you begin by telling us about the situation on the ground right now, and just what you're seeing outside, when you go outside, when you try to, get food, what are people going through at the moment? What are you going through?
Hello.
Yep.
Thank you for having me here to speak about what's happening here in Gaza. We are facing bombing, destruction, displacement, and starvation. As we see in the last days, Israel has forced people in Gaza City and the north areas to evacuate to the south by intensifying its airstrike. Many families have been displaced, but some remain trapped, suffering from shortages of food and water. For example, my friend Zaanoun, a medical student, told me that her family was displaced from Gaza 𝐓𝐡𝐞 camp to Al-Mawasi in Khan Yunis, but she refuses to leave and stay with her aunt. However, as Israeli forces approached last week, they were forced to evacuate it on foot. She told me, I couldn't move for 3 days from the pain of walking. I walked for hours without rest. For 2 years, destruction has been everywhere, hospitals, schools, and infrastructure. Last week, I had a lecture at Al-Aqsa Martyr Hospital. Before leaving, I asked my little sister to bring my phone from a charging point, since we had no electricity since the beginning of this genocide 2 years ago. She was the light bill, and I arrived at the hospital 15 minutes late, only to find people gathering at the gate. When I asked what had happened, they told me a tent in the hospital had been targeted. I said, Alhamdulillah, that I survived this attack, and I went to the lecture. Yes, I survived, but I still thinking about that. What if I am being on time and this attack happened while I'm next to the tent? And the most story that stuck in my mind for a while for Nancy Abu Musa. Nancy was forced to evacuate it on foot for a Nasser neighborhood in the north of Gaza to the south, under drones and shelling. She walked for 10 kilometers. She was 7 months pregnant. And she pushed her husband in a wheelchair when he was wounded and unable to walk. How does a woman do that? Carry two lives inside her and pushed a loved one through the rubble while pumping full nearby. Nancy made it until she arrived at the area that was so-called safe area. But in reality, there was no safety. Inside a makeshift shelter made of nothing, just a blanket on the cold ground, with no medical support, no clean space, and no help. She gave birth for twins. They were born in the world that had no room of them. They didn't cry. They didn't even get a chance to feel the hunger. They died at the moment they start their life. In the same place, at the same time, death came for them before the life could begin. This is not just a story of war. It's a war itself against women, mothers, and hope itself. Yes, they are targeting hope. For example, if we looked at the Nasser targeting last month, they are targeting Nasser hospital twice, and the second strike is they are targeting ambulance and help, so that they attend to and they want to kill the hope and the help itself, so that can make people don't want to help.
Donya, can you talk a little bit more about the intensity of the bombings, just in the last, 3-4 weeks? Of course, Israel has escalated its attacks, especially in the north, in Gaza City and north of Gaza City. But as well, as you just said, the attacks have not stopped in the middle areas and in the south of Gaza. What kinds of bombings are you seeing? And what are people talking about when, as you said, people's tents, these shelters are being bombed and drone attacked. And, there's, again, as everyone has said, over the last 2 years of this genocide, there's no safe place in Gaza. But as people are coming more and more concentrated into the middle area of Gaza Strip, what kinds of attacks are you seeing?
For example, at the middle area, and I hearing the bombs happening in Gaza and the north of Gaza Strip, and also here in the south, there are targeting and pumping even hospitals, street, and the people gathering to pay food or anything just to kill more people. Last week they targeting the street near to Al-Aqsa Martyr Hospital, and after just days they targeting the hospital itself.
Donya, right now, as we're talking to you, there are negotiators from the Palestinian side and from the Israeli side and the mediators in Egypt talking about US President Donald Trump's plan for a ceasefire. Now, we have seen so many times that there's talk about a ceasefire and it doesn't come. So we don't know what will happen now. Everyone is hoping and praying there will be a good result. What are people in Gaza saying about this? Are they hopeful? Are they watching this? Or have they given up hope that there can be an agreement?
For 2 years, people in Gaza have living between bombs and broken boxes. Ceasefire talks and peace negotiations continue in Cairo, Doha, and beyond. Family in Gaza wait in silence under the weight of survival. Each round of negotiations bring hope, a chance to the sky to be quiet, for aid to come in, for one dead to breathe. But time and time again, talks and it are rejected. And with each failed negotiations, a child lost a parent, a mother buried her son, and another neighborhood turns to rubble. Every day of delay means more life lost, more future erased. Civilians find themselves holding on hope to peace while living in the middle of destruction. A ceasefire for us is a difference between life and death, between sleeping under the rubble or sleeping under the open sky. For us, peace simply means to return to of normal life, being able to find bread, to walk without fear, to hug your children and send them to bed while you are not worried about them, to return to school, university, and to live like people. Actually, Gaza needs justice, and it needs the world to remember that behind every headline there are people waiting and hoping for that which can be more safer than today. And we hope and wish this turn of negotiations become true and this horrible genocide can end.
Donya, I think we all hope this genocide will end. It has to end. When you listen to people around you, are they hopeful? Are they waiting? Are they listening to the news? Are they waiting? Or are they, what's the mood there now, listening to these reports about the talks in Sharm el-Sheikh? What are people around you saying?
Actually, it's not the first time we are thinking this is the end, that the genocide will end. But we have more in this time, and people are start thinking about what will happen after this genocide and after they announce that this genocide end. And my family, one of them, they are planning for returning to my city and for my little children to return to their schools and for my university their study. And we are also thinking about rebuild because we lost every building in Gaza and homes, schools, hospitals, and we are thinking of rebuild all of them. Inshallah.
Inshallah. And when people see, when you see, you know very well, better than us, how much destruction Israel did in Gaza. You see it more than us. We see some pictures. When people see that destruction, do they still feel, yes, we're going to rebuild here, we're going to stay in Gaza?
Yes, it's our land. It's our reality, our identity. So we will not leave it. We will rebuild it one time. And if it's necessary, we rebuild it again and again and again. Even if it is completely destruction, and we lost everything, but we will again from 0 and rebuild everything step by step.
When you think about rebuilding your house, what do you imagine? What dreams do you have for your rebuilt home and your neighborhood and the homes of your loved ones?
Actually, I'm thinking more about rebuild centers where I was teaching my students, and I sent for families some pictures, and we chatting what we will make our new center included, and we are start to discuss things, what color we will paint it, and which type of tables, desks, and games we will bring to it. And I think all people here in Gaza thinking in their own plans. And I believe that there are many people will come to Gaza and help to rebuild. And also we are called for international journalism to come here and see and reflect what happened here in Gaza, destruction and its the area and the land itself, because actually there's just a few and a little here. We will publish the local websites and journals.
And can you give us an update on some of your students? You were a kindergarten teacher, or you have been a kindergarten teacher. Can you talk a little bit about some of your students and how they're doing? I can't imagine what they've been through the last 2 years and what it's going to be like for them as this continues.
Actually, we don't have a place, because when we live and evacuated Khan Younis last time, they are targeting the place we were teaching. So we didn't teach until that time, but we still continue on online classes and send materials to parents on WhatsApp. And the most story that stuck in my mind for Salah, on 2023, the Israeli forces arrested his father inside of him, in front of him, and he cannot speak for a month. And after he start learning and continue with the children at the same age, he started speak again with her mother. His mother was very happy that her son speak finally after months. And now when I asked her about Salah, she said to me he is better, he is start to connect and to react with the community. It's not only Salah, there are many stories like Salah.
Yeah, I mean the trauma for anybody, for infants all the way through elementary school age, through high school age, young adults, elders, everyone has been permanently affected by this. And I'm so glad to hear that Salah is doing better. That's a ray of light.
Donya, before we let you go, you talked about looking forward to the future, which is extraordinary when you're facing and you have faced so much difficulty. Just tell us a couple of the things you're really looking forward to when, inshallah, this genocide ends soon. What are you looking forward to in the next weeks, months, and years?
Actually, we will looking for children and kids for a good future for them, and for girls, a good future for them. They are the most affected in the war. They lost many things, and they look for life in not a real view for life, because they actually live the most beautiful period of their life in the genocide. So we will start to let them see how lives look like if there's no genocide.
And what about for you? You know, Donya, what's remarkable about you is you're always thinking about other people, particularly about the children that you have been teaching and looking after for many years. And I know you don't like to talk about yourself, but I want to ask you what you're looking forward to for yourself.
Actually, the children and kids give me power to keep on to have power and energy to continue on my own life. So I I feel they're the best thing on my life.
We hope and pray to see all the children of Gaza growing up with the life they deserve and not the horrible lives we've seen. And so many children have lost their lives and suffered injuries over the last 3 years. All of those children deserve a good life and a future. And I think with people like you close to them, Donya, they have a chance at a good life and a good future. So thank you for everything you're doing for the future of children in Gaza. And you're setting an example for all of us.
Thank you. And before I end, I want to say this is from all of us in Gaza. We see you and we hear your voices in the street, in marches, and we feel your love in every march, in every flag raised for Palestine. Those who join to 𝐐𝐤 𝐄𝐿 we see your courage, and your courage reach us, even if you're put to death. The occupation may have blocked your path, but not your message. Your solidarity reach us, and it's still in our hearts. In a world that are often turns away, your support reminds us that we are not alone. So thank you for standing with Gaza, for standing with the humanity. We carry your love with us under the rubble, under the siege, and into the future we will still believe in. Palestine will be free from the river to the sea.
Amen to that. Amen. And thank you, Donya. And we will not stop talking about Gaza no matter what. And everyone watching today hears that message loudly, and it encourages us to keep going out and speaking. Thank you so much, Donya. Please give our love to your family and all of those around you. And we hope to see you very soon. And we hope that the next time we speak to you soon will be after the end of this genocide.
Yes. Thank you so much, Donya.
Yes, I hope.
Oh, she's the best of us, you know? She's the best of us.
And the news hadn't come. So, I mean,
right. It's
still, the ceasefire hasn't been implemented yet. Let's remember that.
Yeah.
It hasn't started yet. Israel is still bombing and attacking Gaza, but there was so much hope in that discussion and in everything Donya said. So let's hold on to that.
Yeah.
But let's also take to heart her message that we have to keep making our voices heard.
That's right. No, yeah, we can't just we can't rest. This is the time to escalate and recommit to the principles of liberation for Palestine, for all of Palestine and all Palestinians. And on that note, let's bring on Jon Elmer. Hello.
Hello. Another terrific show. It's great to have Jeremy on, and the timing was perfect.
Yep.
And always moving to hear from Donya.
Yeah.
She's a great friend and a great educator, journalist, wears many hats.
I just love that we asked her, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, like, but what are you looking forward to? All she wanted to talk about were the students.
She should be a politician. She's very good at not answering questions directly.
In the world we want to envision, she would be.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, Jon, a busy week. Tell us what you're going to be covering, or maybe just take it away.
The resistance is covering right up to up to the ceasefire line. There's no defeat. There's no surrender. That was all covered really well by Jeremy and you guys in that lead segment. So we got resistance operations that run right up to last night. So we will
incredible,
and some down now.
Yeah, I mean, just in the last 15 minutes, I was looking at some footage of tanks retreating from certain areas. So, yeah, the next few days will be critical, as they always are. But yeah, for now, Jon, take it away.
All right, thank you. All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 734 of Israel's genocide. I am reporting this on the 9th of October with talk of a ceasefire that will apparently be implemented sometime within the next 24 hours. But we will continue to follow those events very closely. But for now, let's take a look at the resistance operations in Gaza from the past week. Since you saw me last, all these videos, as ever, are from that window of time. This is the map from the International Organization of Migration and the United Nations Migration Cluster. It's a map showing the neighborhoods in Gaza City with arrows down to the middle camps and to the south in Mawasi. And you can see the numbers correlate to each neighborhood and the number of people leaving. And overall, the number is 467,523 have been driven out of Gaza City ahead of the Second Battle of Gaza City. And those numbers do not match with what the Israeli military has been putting out. The Israeli military wants to say that people have left Gaza City for their military purposes, ethnic cleansing being their goal. So per the military's assessments, according to Army Radio, 900,000 of the estimated 1 million Palestinians who are residing in Gaza City have moved south. But as we see, this migration cluster, which includes all the organizations that are involved in the migration portfolio, and they have trackers at each position on the way down the road to the evacuation sites, and their number is clearly barely over half of the number that the Israelis said. And for let's take a look at some of the maps that Jeremy was talking about. I'll say off the top of this that we had an excellent interview with Jeremy Scahill, who has done the most important work for sure in the English language following the ceasefire proposals. So if you didn't check that out, I highly encourage you to check that out along with Nora's news report, which is always excellent every week. But we're going to take a look at some of those maps that were talked about earlier in the show. This is the napkin map that Musa Abu Marzouk was making fun of, and that Jeremy and Ali and Nora were talking about, because it's kind of just a random yellow line. It doesn't really correlate to Israeli positions, especially in the south there and in the north and the far north. But this is what Trump released as the first stage of the withdrawal. But let's take a look at the next map, because this is a little bit more clear of some of these aspects of the plan that presumably are going to be clarified in the coming weeks, because they were certainly not clarified in these negotiations. But you can see the first lines there. The blue line is the Israeli line of control. But this is just Al Jazeera using the Trump maps and the Israeli maps to try to figure out where those lines are. But people who follow the resistance report will know that Israeli lines of control are not that blue line at all. They're not in the middle camps in any way. They're not that deep in Gaza City or on the corridors. But the plan is that with the release of the Israeli captives, all of them prisoners of war, soldiers, that the Israeli military will be moving to the yellow line, which is just set in a few hundred meters from the buffer zone, which, according to all of these negotiations, Israel is going to remain in that buffer zone unless that changes in these negotiations. But it seems that that has been something that has been granted to Israel. And you can see on this map, the buffer zone is the striped line right along the border. It goes from the sea along the border with Egypt down to Kerem Shalom crossing in the bottom corner there. The Rafah crossing is about halfway between the Kerem Shalom crossing and that where you see Rafah labeled there. So these are very, very important points that need to be clarified in this deal, because the Rafah crossing was promised by Egypt to be opened in a bilateral agreement with the Israelis because of their peace treaty with Israel from the 1970s. Doesn't allow Israel to have that cordon along the Rafah border. And of course, if we look at that map up in the north, you can see that large parts of Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia fall within that line. So you still have a significant portion of the Palestinian population not able to return to their homes based on these maps. And that's something that we will be tracking in the coming weeks. And just to say about the Israeli military position on this, the Israeli military chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, said just the other day that we must not forget that Hamas remain undefeated as a political and military system in Gaza. This is not a ceasefire that came from defeat. It did not come from surrender. It did not come from defeat. It did not, Israel did not achieve any of its goals in this war, which I reiterate over and over, and I'll do it again right now. They promised to free the captives through violence. They failed to do that. They promised to destroy the 𝐤𝐿 brigades of the military force. They failed to do that. You're going to see that for the next 20 minutes in this video here. They said they were going to destroy the Gaza government, the governance system, the municipal government throughout Gaza. We know that that's not destroyed at all. And they're rebuilding as we speak, and all throughout the war, anything destroyed was being rebuilt by Palestinians. And the fourth point was that Gaza would be no longer a threat to Israel, and that the idea of resistance would be taken from Gaza forever, was what Netanyahu promised. And that is just absurd, because resistance in Gaza is very, very strong. And its perception in most all countries around the world is strong. So that is a rousing defeat of that point as well. So just to note that. So looking at these two maps, these are the maps that people are struggling to make sense of. But this next map is from an Israeli military aligned open source researcher, Ben-Zion Michalis, and he shows here a little more representative map of where the Israeli military is, and that you can see that that yellow line that will be withdrawn to after the release of the Israeli prisoners of war, which should correspond with the release of thousands of Palestinians, including 250 with life sentences, 250 out of 303 life sentences in Israeli prisons. But you can see that that yellow line is out of Gaza City. It's up along the border. In Khan Yunis, it's holding those two corridors, the Morag corridor and the Magan Oz corridor. For now, those appear to be what Israel is trying to hold. And you can see along the southern border, the Philadelphia corridor will still remain in Israeli hands for now. But as I said, there was a promise from Egypt to the Palestinians that that corridor, the Philadelphia corridor, would be dealt with in bilateral talks that should open the Rafah crossing, because that is an absolute primary core demand for the Palestinians. So we can see in that map a little bit more. The blue line is where the Israelis are now, and you can see that the blue line, if you follow it from the coastline north of Gaza City, there it cuts. They're surrounding with 3 divisions right now, Gaza City, and they've pushed across the Netzarim corridor, which you can see there is the white line as you follow that blue line out of Gaza City. But then the middle camps, they don't have any control at all of the middle camps. They're in the buffer zone there, all the way down the coast to Khan Yunis. and in Khan Yunis, the whole Mawasi area is not under Israeli control. So there's still a lot to be worked out on these discussions, but I wanted to show you these maps and compare them to the other maps and to the talk of the ceasefire that we had earlier on in the program. So moving to northern Gaza, we're focusing in on Gaza City. The main battle in Gaza City this past week was in the Tel El-Hawa neighborhood in the southwest corner of Gaza City, and the Al Ramal areas, the downtown core of Gaza City. This is the commercial, industrial, social downtown core of the Gaza Strip, and the Shati refugee camp, the beach refugee camp. It was the line to the north of where Israel had control. And there was also fighting in Sheikh Radwan, which is in the northeast side of Gaza City, sort of between Gaza City and Jabalia, where you see that on the map. Sheikh Radwan abuts Jabalia. And so that's the focus of the battle for the last week. Previous to that, Gideon's Chariots Part 1, the focus of the battle was on Zaytoun there. And the red you see below Zaytoun on that map, that's the Netzarim corridor that we have blocked off in red. And then Zaytoun, Shajaiya, and Tufa, the neighborhoods along the ridge line, those were the targets for Gideon's Chariots Part 1. And yesterday, there was a raid on the Netzarim corridor carried out by a Qassam Raider unit using a tunnel. They were able to access the Israeli position inside their military cordon. So I've been reporting on this week after week, that the Palestinian resistance is able to penetrate these defensive positions of the Israelis, Netzarim corridor being the primary corridor, defensive corridor that Israel believed that they were untouchable in. And the Palestinians, on the eve of the ceasefire talks, sent the message to the Israelis that they're not safe in the Netzarim corridor. According to the Israeli military probe investigation into the operation, the Golani Brigade's reconnaissance unit were stationed in the area, and at least 5 Qassam fighters came out of a tunnel and engaged in a gun battle with Israeli troops. Israeli troops, of course, didn't re-engage with that gun battle. They called in air support and drone strikes, tank shelling to handle the situation, as they do. They don't face-to-face fight very often, if at all. Most of the Qassam raiders returned to their base safely, according to the IDF, although they don't use that terminology. But according to the IDF's probe, they likely fled back down into the tunnel, which is certainly what they did, and returned to their base safely. The first operation that I'm going to break down on the show today is another operation into a defensive position, a breach of an Israeli base. But this base was in the Sister Rosary School in Tel El-Hawa. This was a school that runs from elementary school through high school. Ruwaida Amer, an excellent journalist and educator whose work you have read on the Electronic Intifada and have watched on this program, Reporting from Gaza, wrote about the school that the Israelis made this base in for 972 magazine in late 2023. And she writes, in November, while Israeli forces were present in Tel El-Hawa area, so this is the first time they were present, in November 2023. In November, while Israeli forces were present in the Tel El-Hawa area, they entered the school with bulldozers and tanks, demolishing the schoolyard, destroying the wall around the campus, the library, which was filled with books, laptops, television screens, computers, interactive lesson displays. Those were all bombed and burned to the ground. Only ashes remain, she reports. The elevator that was built last year was burned and destroyed, as was the school theater where we gathered for the most beautiful moments, from graduation ceremonies to national, cultural, and religious celebrations. Israeli tanks and bulldozers destroyed even the kindergarten. And this school, the Sisters Rosary School, was established in 2000, and between 2000 and 2023, they went from 160 students to 1,250 students in this Catholic school that was serving a multi-denominational school, often serving underprivileged Palestinian Muslim families in Gaza City, a significant institution in the city. And that's what this base is. And that's what we're going to see. So this points to, in the first, what Ruwaida is reporting on, was the first time the Israelis sacked Gaza City. And they went around and they burned everything. That was their move at that time, was that they weren't knocking down every building like they came to do later in the genocide. But at that point in the genocide, people remember back, they were torching everything. They were torching buildings, taking TikTok videos, showing them throwing fire into buildings to burn them and to leave nothing but the burnt out husks of the buildings, which they then in Gideon's Chariots 1 and were attempting to do in Gideon's Chariots 2 to eliminate the buildings altogether. So you can see just in this one school in Gaza City, the genocide progress from what Israelis believed would be their one shot at fighting in Gaza City. And there they went scorched earth, burn all the buildings, burn people's belongings, have people come home to burnt out houses that didn't have any of their belongings, or the schools, burn them out so there was no resources left in the schools. And you can see the genocidal nature of Israel's war through these stories. So this is the Sisters Rosary School in Tel El Hawa. Now let's take a look at the operation that the Qassam Brigades executed in this school. So they're showing you here just a little sizzle reel of the operation. The key aspects of the operation were a guerrilla action device placed within the turret gap of that tank that you saw. And this is the fighter who carried, you can see him with the green triangle. He was the one who carried multiple IEDs to the Namur troop carriers. Here we see the fighters assembling and talking, and the fighters say, the brothers in the assault unit are just meters away from the target. God willing, we will take down this tank and its crew. This next fighter say, we are the Qassam Brigades. We have prepared for you deadly ambushes. And the final fighter says, we will remain on the mountain of archers, and behind us the voice of the prophet shaking us. Do not retreat. Do not retreat. And that was the poem that we have cited a few times, because Qassam has used that. They used it last summer in an operation in Shujaiya, and we saw it in Jabalia a few weeks ago, and now we're seeing it again. And it's a poem called The Dove by Sudanese poet Muhammad Abdul Bari. And the Qassam fighters have been using this the whole time. So you can see that first fighter, he puts the guerrilla action device into the turret gap, blasting the tank turret where the commander, loader, and gunner are. All three of them were severely wounded in that operation. But you see the head of the second fighter there. He's about to use the explosion as cover to advance on two Namur troop carriers that are also inside this base. Israel believes they're safe inside this school base, and Qassam is raiding them as soon as they establish this base. There you see the fighter emerging with his guerrilla action devices that he put into the Namur troop carrier. And the battle also involves a gunfight. And there you see the medevac helicopter landing to take out what the Israelis reported as 11 casualties, 5 seriously wounded, including the entire tank crew, and 6 more wounded within the shooting. And we look at the next one, I just broke down this so you can see it in each part. You'll see the weapon here as we've been tracking. This is the Bark, the Lightning guerrilla action device. It's a smaller canister. We've seen this in the Gideon's Chariots era of the battle, where Palestinians have adapted their weaponry to meet the moment of that invasion, which was that they had realized that they were able to get right up to tanks and get so close that they could deposit these lighter. This essentially looks like a shawad, but it's like a third of the weight of a shawad, and it's easier to carry for the fighters and allow them to more nimbly. We've seen them climb up on top of the tanks, but to cross terrain also with these devices. So here we are seeing it again. We saw it in Khan Yunis in the south. We saw it all the way in the north in Jabalia. We saw it in Shujaiya, and now we're seeing it in Gaza City. So an interesting development that I told you I would track, and here we are tracking it. So they're used it in this operation as well. The next slide you can see is just where the fighters position to the tank. You can see it gives you a good idea. This is Qassam's editors making that tank red shaded, and then the fighter is in the green that we're looking at. People who can't see this screen right now, we're looking at a Merkava tank in its full size, 70 tons of a tank. And the fighter himself is barely, his head barely goes above the hull. And then the turret on top of that, it almost doubles the size of the tank. So you can see how small the person is beside the tank, but just how bold these operations are and effective, because essentially it's a guided, it works the same way as a guided missile hitting exactly the point of target that you want. So he's sliding that underneath the turret gap. You can see the ball and chains hanging down there. That is to intercept Yasin fire that will break up the rocket and to protect that turret gap. So the fighter's actually going to the defensive part of the tank and opening that series of chains and slipping the device inside of it, and then blowing it up inside the turret, which is where the loader, the gunner, where the weaponry is, and where the tank commander is, who is one of the 11 casualties in this operation. We could see it again even closer in this next slide. It just remarkable man versus machine. And this is something, you know, people that I covered the second Intifada in Gaza and in Jenin, and watched the kids fight tanks like this in the same way. They're not fazed by these Israeli you know, weapons that define their state. This tank defines the Israeli military industry and their country as a fighting country. With the Merkava tank here, we see being defeated by Palestinian fighters on the ground. So if we take a look at the next slide, you can see the fighter, see him carrying the guerrilla action devices here. And that's just noting on the screen that he's carrying the 2 canisters to deposit them into the hatches of the 2 Namr troop carriers. So there was 5 seriously wounded and 6 others moderately wounded in this operation, according to the Israelis, including the whole tank crew and 2 officers, the officer of the tank and the officer of a second tank that was part of the gun battle. Yeah, so if we look at the next one, are we on 10? Because we do have the audio on this next slide, because I wanted to show you what this looks like with audio. So just to warn you, you're going to hear gunshots, but you're going to see and hear this raid full. And that's the medevac helicopter, the sign that you always see at the end of these operations that show, that tell the truth about Israeli casualties when you see that helicopter. So significant raid. Should the ceasefire come into effect and that be the last raid of the battle in Gaza City, we won't be saying that right now because there's a long road ahead. But just to tell you that going right up to these ceasefire negotiations, the resistance is carrying out command and control operations that show they're functioning as a military fighting force and are able to penetrate breaching operations of Israeli positions that the Israelis are establishing with all of their American supplied weaponry, and are still unable to secure those areas. And that's why when we talk about Israeli presence inside Gaza with some of those maps, and you heard Jeremy talking about that too, because it hasn't been decided for the further aspects of the ceasefire. What these two operations show, the raid on the Netzarim corridor yesterday and this raid on the Sisters Rosary school base, Israeli base, that right up to the end, right up to the moment the Palestinian resistance is able to be in this fight, and Israel has to find another way to try to achieve the goals of the war, because the fighters didn't allow them to achieve their goals. The Gaza municipality and the Gaza government didn't allow them to achieve their goals. The students that Donya talked about, the first thing they're going to do is rebuild their school and classes will start. The Palestinians are undefeated in this war, and Israel achieved none of its objectives. And I don't think history is going to look, unless you're an extreme Israeli propagandist, as any kind of victory at all in any way. In many ways, it's the exact opposite. Israel has shown itself to the world to be an illegitimate pariah state that carries out genocide and looks for negotiated settlements to that genocide. There'll be lots more time to talk about that, though. Let's take a look at number 12. Again, we're seeing in southwest Gaza City, in Tel El Hawa, fighters here. You see them load up the Tandem 85. And when you see a Tandem 85 loaded up, built by the Qassam brigades, this weapon doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. You'll know you're going to get a bulldozer. And sure enough, there's the bulldozer, direct hit on the cab. So Qassam is still using appropriate weapons. Any indications that we're seeing of their ability to fight being reduced or blocked is just simply not true. This is the same weapon. This is the same shot that we would have seen on the first day of the war. And the next one after this is a Yasin 105 strike here, moving through the alleys that still exist in Gaza City. So using the alley as cover and a fire. It's difficult to see the armored vehicle, but I believe that we're seeing a Merkava tank being hit there with the Yasin 105. They don't use the Tandem 85 against the heavy armor. So again, appropriate weapons being used in this operation. And after this one, we got one more Tandem 85 versus an armored bulldozer. We know from Army radio that the Israelis only went to battle in Gaza City with 60% of their bulldozer capacity because the resistance had destroyed the others. There you can see the bulldozer there and another direct hit. And now we move on. This is a sniper operation. And again, we can't show these operations, but you can find these on my X account, which is just my name on X. And you can see there the soldier standing on top of the turret of his tank, which is sort of the later battles version of Israeli soldiers in a window. Standing with 2 points touching your tank is not military standard for how to operate. And he is going to pay the price for that. You can see that in the next slide with the famous triangle. And the Israelis admitted that this soldier was killed in sniper fire. This was on the 24th of September. And they admitted that they did not find the source of the fire on that operation that killed that Israeli soldier. Next, we have a Saraya sniper operation. You can see the soldier on the roof, again with the triangle, and we can see the surveillance gear set up to the right of the soldier there. Again, we're not going to be able to show you this shot, but you can see the shooter in the next slide with an Iranian Dragunov, an SVD sniper rifle. And you can see, again, proper technique inside the building, completely inside the building they're shooting from, no muzzle flash to be tracked. And that's why these fighters get away. You can see that on the next slide as well. That's why these fighters get away, and the Israeli military admitted that this shooter wounded a soldier, and they were unable to locate the source of the fire on that one. The next one we have is this ambush is actually from last week. My notes got stuck together and we skipped this one last week, but this is an ambush by Soraya al-Quds in the Tel al-Hawa neighborhood. You can see the two Humvees here. The fighters are talking here. The commander says, "We dedicate this operation to the heroes of Soraya al-Quds in all fields, in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And this is a message to our brave leadership abroad. We say to them, your sons, your soldiers, we are lying in wait for this usurping enemy, and we will ambush them and we will drive them out." And what you're going to see is a patrol route here being driven by two open Humvees. You can see there's no side panels on that Humvee. You can see the soldier there blurred out, as we do for these videos. And then these soldiers, these Soraya al-Quds fighters, are going to spray that Jeep. You can see the Jeep being targeted there, and you're going to see here the Jeep's retreat. And as the Jeep retreated, they left behind their Tavor bullpup Israeli weapons industries weapon. Probably fell out in their panic. And there you see the medical, those are the medical Humvees doing the medevac for that ambush. So a successful ambush here. Again, this is an attack helicopter that had to be brought in. That's not a medevac. That's an Apache that needs to come to support the ambushed targets. And then this end screen says that the rifle was captured during the operation. And there you see it there. That's the sort of, you see the Israeli logos there. And that's an Israeli weapon, the Tavor, that we have seen a lot. We saw the commander last week showing off captured ones of those. During the prisoner exchanges in January, we saw lots of Tavors that had been captured. We saw in the Nahal Oz raid, a Tavor rifle be captured. So a significant Soraya al-Quds operation the previous week. And now back to this week, we have another Soraya al-Quds operation. Again, a return to sender operation. Those are M15 Israeli anti-tank mines, American anti-tank mines. And that was a Shawad canister, an explosively formed penetrator. That there with the plastic that you see is a pressure plate detonator. They bury the pressure plate detonator, the Israeli vehicle, they pre-plant it, and then the Israeli vehicle drives over it. That's how these pre-planted weapons are used. Now we're seeing the tanks and bulldozers. Well, that's two tanks, but you're going to see bulldozers come in at the end of this one because they're moving through that same space, and they have eyes on that area, on the ambush area. The explosion and the smoke coming up from that showing a direct hit. And again, just surveillance, have eyes on these positions, even though this is a pre-planted weapon. So the spotters have played a crucial role all throughout this battle. We've seen that, and we see that in that video as well. And one final one from Soraya al-Quds, another return to sender operation. They're showing us there another Merkava tank. You can see two of them. There's a Mark 84 series. That's a Mark 84 of the Mark 80 series bombs. That's a 2,000-pound bomb. And when the bombs don't go off, some people ask this in the comments about how they rewire the weapon. And what happens when the bomb doesn't detonate is that the fuse didn't detonate. And so the resistance is simply able to attach a fuse that reignites the same weapon that was dropped, which is a 2,000-pound bomb. That's about 50% of it is explosive weight. And that's how the resistance has been able to do it. So that is the resistance report for this week, day 734 of Israel's genocide. And we will continue to be on the story.
Thank you, as always, Jon. Just some extraordinary images there. Yeah, I mean, any claim that the resistance is just going to willingly surrender or disarm is pure fantasy at this point.
Pure fantasy.
Yeah, just incredible. Ali, just a minute or so ago, you alerted us to a possible breaking news about Israeli partial withdrawal in Gaza. What do we know about that?
Well, we just know that this is a map that has been published by Al Jazeera a short while ago that purports to show the initial withdrawal line. And I'd like to also get John's thoughts on this. But according to this map, it shows Israel retaining control of 58% of Gaza's territory. Now, the area it appears to be withdrawing from will be the area where the vast majority of the population is now concentrated. But as you can see, Israel would retain a very large swath around Gaza, including the whole south, most of Rafah. And to me, my initial thought about this, again, aside from the critically important fact that a ceasefire will give much needed relief to people in Gaza immediately, is that this does set things up for a very difficult, if not impossible, stage after this initial phase. Because if Israel is going to say, we're not going to withdraw from any more territory until Hamas disarms, I just don't see, Hamas and the rest of the resistance disarm, I don't see how you can get beyond this. But that's just an initial reaction.
I mean, John, jump in for sure. But so looking at the map now, it looks like most, if not all, of Khan Yunis, all of Rafah, all of eastern Gaza, plus north of Jabalia, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and then the whole entire, eastern strip of Gaza itself will still be controlled by Israel. Does that also mean that, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, like, is Israel also going to keep launching attacks on Palestinians in Gaza? What are they going to be doing? What does the occupation actually even look like at this point?
These are wide open questions, and they were not dealt with in this first stage. And the areas Ali said are correct. Like that is Rafah. That Tel al-Sultan is off limits there. That area along the coast of Khan Yunis, that's Gush Katif. That used to be a settlement. So it does appear that Western Khan Yunis people will return to Western Khan Yunis, but Khan Yunis is very spread out. So you can see like Bani Sahela is under Israeli control, large parts of Khan Yunis. Right. And then when you move up to Gaza City, that's Shuja'iyah.
All of eastern, all of eastern Gaza City.
Yeah. That looks like the Salahuddin Road. That is
right.
Yeah, that is Daraj. That would be a part of Tufa, significant part of Shuja'iyah. Even temporary, like even if this is temporary, it's
still, I mean, we're going from, like 82% of control to 58%. It will give some relief, but obviously 60%,
in exchange for all the Israeli prisoners of war.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what? And then what is the next phase?
Yeah, so
I don't think any of us felt very good about this, about what this all looks like. I think we all feel extremely well about the fact that this is going to lead to a surge in aid for people who are desperately in need of that. that mechanism for aid is no longer the GHF, that it is the previously established United Nations delivery system, which is a very, very critical point of Palestinian sovereignty that was the GHF was attempting to undermine or destroy. So the surge of aid is a very, very critical point. And I think while that aid is, I mean, even the surge, to say 600 trucks is a surge that is the siege level.
Yeah.
500 trucks was the
bare minimum.
2 decades of the siege of Gaza was 500 trucks. But to be able to stockpile and to replenish and to get, the smallest details, to get gloves into the hospitals, to get tools into
anesthesia,
to get fuel to run the desalination plants and to get the oxygen in the hospitals running. All of that stuff is extremely important, and it is happening. And that is a very important development. Yeah. Looking at these maps, they do not make you feel confident about what it is that has been set upon here. And I think that's what Jeremy was saying, that the leadership acknowledges that at this stage right now, for the release of the captives, this is a massive gamble.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that struck me about this map, the yellow line map, and the fact that is the fact that Rafah, is going to be still under this area, still occupied by Israel, and that makes me think about the fate of the Yasser Abu Shabab collaborators gang that we've covered in the past. And Ali, you alerted us earlier today to an article in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, a London-based newspaper, which mentioned that about this gang, that apparently there is a disagreement between the Shin Bet and the Israeli army about what will happen to them in the event of the Israeli army pullout. So, according to this report, the Shin Bet, Israel's secret police, effectively wanted to withdraw them to a safe area. It's unclear whether that's outside Gaza or within some sort of enclave in Gaza. But the military intelligence actually, and the Israeli military, took the position that they're going to effectively abandon the militia. And so if we take the reports of this, and like you said, John, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Like, we don't know what is actually going to happen in terms of, will they even withdraw to this line? Will they withdraw to the phases? Is it all a smokescreen? We don't know, but something is clearly happening. But to take the more optimistic possibility, if there is this discussion happening about this gang being abandoned, it shows that if we're to take that reports seriously, it seems that they are planning on withdrawing further than beyond this yellow line.
Yeah, in the second phase, they're to withdraw significantly further to that line into the original few hundred meters from the border, stretching up to 1,200 meters from the border. But that area in Rafah that's many kilometers. Yeah. So
so if this report is accurate, then it shows that this this phased withdrawal seems to be a realistic possibility that they are actually considering.
Yes, I think at the first stage that Netanyahu is trying to sell to his people, he's trying to sell that we're in Gaza and we got our captives back. That's his victory. His only thin shot at victory is to tell his base that they're still inside Gaza, and he's been underscoring that. So I think that this is something that we should allow the mediators. The key thing that we don't know is the maps from Hamas. And these maps in the negotiations are certainly being really nailed down. And I think that will happen after this, after the release of the prisoners, which was the gamble.
Yeah. Ali?
I just, I agree with all of that. I just wanted to add that also if that report is true, Asa, it also shows once again the fate of collaborators.
Yeah.
And this was the same with Israel's collaborators in Lebanon, and it's always the fate of collaborators that those you serve, they'll throw you away when they're done with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another interesting detail from that report is that apparently the reason that the Israeli military intelligence gave for disagreeing with the Shin Bet, that they wanted to abandon them, was, according to them, there was signs that some elements of that gang have actually taken up Hamas on its offer of amnesty in order to come back into the fold, in terms of not Hamas specifically, but in terms of the national fold of the Palestinians, rather than presumably being executed. And they have, it seems that this gang some of its members are abandoning it, and that offer of amnesty is being taken up by some of the members of the gang. I mean, look, the as we've heard from when we talked to Mohammed Shahada, who an expert from Gaza who has followed this gang quite closely, when we did our interview with him, he made the point that its capabilities were exaggerated anyway. It was only a few hundred members. It seems from more recent reports that they've been recruiting more recently, but nonetheless, there's no realistic capability of them taking on Hamas. But what they were good at doing was looting, was stealing aid, with the coordination of the Israelis.
Yeah, in massive brand new warehouses,
hoarding it,
taking stolen aid. And the thing about the aid influx that is set to happen, and the United Nations organizations are ready to deliver that aid because it's all right outside the border, within a few kilometers of the border. It will only take, you can measure it in hours, 24, 48, 72 hours and of aid coming in before the entire criminal market for aid is eliminated by the presence of aid inside Gaza.
Yeah.
They were only effective insofar as they were stealing aid and putting it on the market, which was a devastating reality for Palestinians. And these groups need amnesty because the population, what I hear daily from Gaza is that the anger is directed at these people for stealing the aid and selling it on the black market for prices that nobody can afford, that completely destroyed the communal aspect of the aid system in Gaza, which was that everybody got aid regardless of their physical fitness or ability to pay. People got dignified deliveries of aid through text messages. They weren't forced to go to, areas to pick up in large groups of people. The aid distribution system was a dignified and sovereign Palestinian system, and that undermining that system is Yasser Abu Shabab and his gang. So I think the anger will be pointed at those people and will be remembered for a long time, because people, the suffering was related to that, because previously people would sell UN aid if they had extra in difficult times and during this genocide, but they didn't put it at the prices that the gangs put it at. So really it tore the fabric of Gaza in a way that pushed people into to be seen to the world as begging for food, which is not, the way that Palestinians have ever been. So.
Yeah, and that was a deliberate, coordinated, organized mechanism by Israel to try and completely disintegrate the social fabric and the collective, spirit of Palestinian neighborhoods and families. that have been enduring for decades and millennia in Palestine. So we have a lot yet to see and analyze and be on top of, and that's what we are promising to keep doing for you, our listeners and viewers and readers around the world. On that note, let's take a look at the Electronic Intifada website. Asa, I know that you have you helped edit a really interesting story that's kind of a left turn from our regular day-by-day coverage of Gaza and Palestine and the region. Can you talk a little bit about this story? Just give us a thumbnail sketch of this one.
Yeah, so our contributor Jim DeBrose wrote this quite long article about the plot to kill JFK, and it's really interesting. I mean, this is worth, if you want a long read on the weekend or something, this is worth sitting down and really diving into. It's a really interesting piece. Long story. I mean, I can't really get into the whole thing, but long story short. There have been 2 official U.S. government investigations into the assassination of the President John F. Kennedy in 1963. One took place in the 1960s and one in the 1970s. And the first one said that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman who acted alone and there was no conspiracy and he just randomly decided to kill the president one day. The second investigation, the House Select Committee on Assassination, said that there was, quote, a probable conspiracy, unquote, to kill JFK, but they couldn't identify the members of the conspiracy. Many independent JFK researchers over the decades have said that there was a conspiracy by essentially the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and organized crime elements to, including anti-communist Cubans, and all had various grudges against JFK, and they conspired to all kind of in a crossfire to murder JFK. What the interesting part of this article that Jim's putting forward is saying that part of that conspiracy was organized crime elements with links to Israel specifically, and also the state of Israel itself. So this is a really interesting topic, and it sounds incredible. It is incredible, but I assure you, we always fact check every article that we publish. This one we sort of did it extra fact check. I can say. So it's definitely worth the read.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Israel, and that's called "Israel Was Part of the Conspiracy to Kill JFK" by Jim DeBrose, right there on the front page of the Electronic Intifada. Ali, you and Tamara also helped put together some videos about Turkey. Is Turkey doing all it can for Palestine? Do you want to give a little? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Nora. This is a really interesting piece by Daniel Thorpe and Alparslan Aydin, a very good article you see there with the headline, "Is Turkey Doing All It Can for Palestine?" And this wonderful 9-minute mini documentary produced by the Electronic Intifada by Daniel and Alparslan, looking at the debate in Turkey. And let's just take a look at a couple of clips from this mini documentary we just published. Let's take a look at the first one, Tamara.
It looks like actually Turkey cares more money than Palestinian people's lives.
Dünyada İsrail'le ticaretini kesmiş kaç tane devlet var? Bizim inisiyatifimizde olan her şeyi yapıyoruz. Uluslararası hukuka da uygun şekilde bunları yapıyoruz.
The widespread popular support among Turks for Palestine is evident in the streets of Istanbul. The government is also outspoken on the plight of Palestinians and often condemns Israel's crimes. Public, however, do not think the government is doing enough. Her release, 𝐄𝐥𝐿 soon staged another protest, this time addressing President Recep Tayyip Erdogan personally at an event.
Gazze'de sadece insani değerler değil, başta Birleşmiş Milletler olmak üzere uluslararası sistemin güvenilirliği de sınanmıştır.
Everything escalated. It happened so quickly. Security grabbed me and they tried to cover my mouth. They put us in detainment car. We were in the police station for 4 days and then they put us in jail for a week. So in our indictment, I saw the blame sentences. It's free Palestine, or from river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This kind of.
Yeah, so that was actually two clips that we put together back to back. And the first voice you heard there and the last voice was this young Turkish activist, 𝐄𝐥𝐿. And you also heard a voice in there of a member of parliament from the ruling AKP party defending the government's position. But it's the article details some of the ways that Turkey continues to provide Israel, particularly with oil across its territory through Azerbaijan. And the protests, that young activist 𝐄𝐥𝐿 is part of a group called 1,000 Youth for Palestine that has taken inspiration from Palestine Action in the UK and done some direct action. And she and several other activists are on trial in Turkey. And so it just shows there's a very sharp debate there. And this is a really interesting film. It's also a little bit of a departure for us, but we were very pleased to work with Daniel and Alparslan to make this great 9-minute documentary. So you'll find it on the website by going to the article. It's also on the YouTube channel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ali. And who do we have to thank this week?
Well, we have a lot of people. While I find them, I have my notes here. But just again, if we go to the front page of EI, I just want to point to. I read it earlier today. This piece right on the front panel there by Aisha Khan, and I just want to highlight that because all of what we were saying in the discussion earlier with Jeremy, all of these countries that have been complicit are going to try to go back to business as usual. And this article highlights the need for accountability and the need to challenge countries like the UK, which are refusing to fulfill their obligations to arrest Israeli war criminals. So that piece as well is something I just wanted to shout out. All right, I have my notes now. And as usual, I want to thank each and every person who's watching, who reads the Electronic Intifada, who shares our articles, particularly the incredibly powerful and moving pieces by our reporters and writers in Gaza. That piece you read at the beginning of the program from Asim and Nabi, who was so powerful, Nora. And that's an example of the work that all of our readers and viewers help us to produce and also help us to share by getting the word out. So thanks to each and every one of you. And I'm just going to shout out a few people: Omar, Ray, Olga, Linda, William, Sidi Ali, Mohsen, Antonella, Amitai, Elizabeth, Irene, Isabel, and Shah. Thank you all for the donations you give that make our work possible. Everything you see, everything you read, everything you hear is made possible by people like you. That's what makes us independent. That's what allows us to now. It's been 2 years and 2 days of challenging Israeli atrocity propaganda, lies, bringing you voices directly from Gaza, bringing you the resistance report from Jon, all of the investigative reporting we do that has debunked the lies of the rape hoax, the work that you, Asa, have done on the Hannibal Directive, showing how Israel killed hundreds of its own people, at least on October 7th. And I note that today, October 9th, is actually the second anniversary of the first live stream we ever had.
Yeah.
So this is exactly 2 years since the first live stream, and our first ever guest on the first live stream, I will never forget this, was our very dear 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. And it seems like longer than 2 years when you think back to all the people we've spoken to, all the incredible testimonies we've heard, the sense of community that you, our viewers and listeners, have created around this live stream, that it's a place for us to gather, to bear witness, to cry, as I know many of us have. I know I have. I know that sometimes I haven't been able to keep myself together, and I know I'm not the only one, because everything we've seen and heard over the last 2 years is so difficult and appalling. And we've also laughed because, you know, there is also moments of joy, moments of resilience, as again you show us every week, Nora. And because I think it's a sign of strength to be able to keep our humor through all of this. And we don't know what's ahead. I remember the first ceasefire in November 2023. It already seemed like the war, the genocide had been going on so long, and yet it was only, what, a
6
few weeks.
Yeah.
And the sense of elation and hope. And I remember the last time we had Rifat on was, I think, on the last day of that truce. And I remember we were messaging, and I was saying, you know, Rifat, can you come on? And he said, yes, if they extend the ceasefire. And you'll recall they extended it for 2 days, and we were able to have him on for that last conversation that was only 7 minutes long because the power cut out where he was. There have been so many moments like that, talking to Ahmed al-Na'ouk about his whole family, more than 20 people massacred when his family's home was destroyed. And I think we've documented history here, particularly the voices of people in Gaza, and it's all thanks to each and every, to you, my colleagues, to all our writers and contributors, to our all our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada, and to each and every person who tunes in, who watches the segments, who shares the work we do. And we have never known what is going to happen from 1 week to the next. And so the only pledge we can make to you is that no matter what happens, we will be here, and we hope you will be too.
I think that says it all. Thank you so much, Ali. I want to thank, of course, Tamara Nassar for directing and producing this program, to Eli Gerzon for social media production, Pierre Loisel for packaging this show into a radio program, Maureen Claire Murphy, of course, our senior editor, Michael Brown for fact-checking, Dave, Omar, Leah, everybody at the Electronic Intifada. On behalf of all of us, thank you. Sign up for our email list. Keep clicking that donate button, and we will see you next week. Thank you.